Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today is December 27th, 2020, and this is episode 12 of The Gray Stage. We're reviewing the book authored by Greg Fernandez Jr. called The Gray Stage. He'll be joining me today and going through chapter 7 of the book. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Hey Dan, always glad to be here. This will be another very interesting show here. I wanted to kind of try to get to the whole office bedroom in one show, but I think there's just way too much for us to cover in just one show here.
There is a lot, and for those following along, it's chapter 7 we'll be covering today. The first half of that begins in the softcover book on page 57. If you're following along, no need to, of course, you can just listen to this, but this episode is good because Greg will also be showing photographs in the background as like the other episodes. So if you can, it's very important to watch the video version of this. Chapter 7, once again, page 57. The title of this is The Office Bedroom. And for those, just to clarify, the Crowley family in Apple Valley bought a 3-bedroom home in 2013. The bodies were found January 17th of 2015. It is a 3-bedroom home. It's a rambler. The master bedroom was where David and Comel slept. Rania had another bedroom for her. The third bedroom wasn't used as a bedroom or a guest room per se, but David turned that into his office. And so the title of this chapter is called The Office Bedroom, and this is what we're going to be focusing on today. It starts off with saying, Item 27 is a blood stain in the hallway just outside of David's office bedroom. DNA results tied the blood to Comel. So what do we have here, Greg? You got the information here, the photos. It's item 27 is really just a blood stain found in the hallway.
Yep.
And ties to Comel. Mm-hmm. So far, the blood we've been seeing throughout the home has all been Comel's for the most part, right? The large amounts.
And I was looking at these photos to see if there was any other blood or if it's just this one little spot. And of course, with the images, sometimes it's really hard to tell. But it does look like it's just one little swipe. So here's item 27. Maybe a couple swipes here, something going on, maybe a couple fingers or something passing by. But it looks very out of place. There's no other blood in this area. It looks kind of like a finger swipe. There's no blood on the carpet that we can see. If people that are looking at this image, looking at item 27, does this help us see when the bloody footprints were possibly on the wood floor? Meaning, can we tell which way that the blood is being swiped in this image, left to right, right to left? It doesn't look like north to south or south to north. Would you agree with that, Dan? It looks like left to right or...
Yes, and it's near the door frame, so it looks like someone either entering or exiting that room left it behind. It's not cast-off blood. It's not high or medium velocity blood spatter per se. It's smeared, much like that Kleenex box in the kitchen.
Yep, kind of the same type of thing. So looking at that one, glad you brought up that Kleenex too, because that was another one. You can. This almost looks, if you were to compare the image of item 26 to 27, it looks like very, very similar actually. But so looking at this, can we tell if this is going into the office? Is this a finger or a blood swipe going into the office, or does it look like it's leaving the office?
I can't tell. Once again, I'm not an expert. I don't even know if an expert looking at this would be able to tell, but maybe we can get someone to comment on that to see if it's someone going, in or out of the office. I would assume it's from the right hand, perhaps, going into that office room versus the left hand. Either way, it seems like it's someone's hand or finger that was covered with blood. Just once again, a smear.
Right.
And because we do see blood in that office, we know there was activity going back and forth from that hallway to the office.
Right. And we know that
would make sense, but it does appear to be just a smear from someone's finger.
From someone's finger. Yeah, I think, and I got an image up here of the tissue, which, like you said, it does kind of look similar to that. I know there's a and so this was to kind of understand which happened first. You know, was the office writing, did that happen first? Did the laptop writing happen first? Did the blood writing happen first? It's all kind of just, I was hoping, you know, with all this, they would be able to kind of piece together some type of theory, right? I mean, if they're going to blame David, it seems like, okay, what is their theory about what did David do first? Which writing did he do first? Did he do second? Did he do third? And we don't see any of that, right? They haven't really gotten into that, maybe because they just simply don't know. But then again, it goes back to the whole thing. What do they know, and what do we see here within all of this that will help us understand why they believe David is guilty? So look,
and I'm glad you have this photo of the Kleenex box, because this too, we know it's blood. We know it's human blood. In fact, it's Comel's. But is this swiped or smeared from a finger that would leave a fingerprint behind, or is this blood smeared with someone wearing a latex glove? My same question is for the one on item 27 outside the hallway. Yes, it's blood. It looks to me like it's staged or planted there, or staged on purpose there. It wasn't an accident. But the question is there fingerprints? Is there ridges? Can we do a fingerprint test to identify? Now, if David did this, meticulously planned to kill his wife, daughter, and then himself, there would be no need for him to be wearing a latex glove at all. So this is the important question is there a fingerprint? Is there ridge detail? Because if someone was wearing a glove, we have another whole issue altogether. Why would someone be wearing a glove if this was a double homicide followed by a suicide? Now, if this was a triple homicide, which we have deemed it to be, there most certainly would be someone wearing a glove or a pair of gloves or a latex glove or some kind of glove to cover up the fingerprints. And this looks exactly like what we're seeing here.
So there's the swipe right there, whatever it is. Does it look like just one finger, maybe two fingers? I mean, it's pretty pretty thick here.
Yeah, maybe one or two, but once again it's a swipe or what I would call a smear.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a fingerprint. It's not it's not cast off blood. Someone left it there behind. I can't tell once again if they're going into the office or out of the office.
It just looks very out of place. It really does. Similar, like you said, similar to item 26, to the tissue box.
What we have to do is ask ourselves, is it authentic, number one? Was it actually left there accidentally, or was it planted there on purpose? Or did someone, one of the killer or killers, make a mistake and leave this blood behind? Was it a mistake? I don't know if there's even an answer to that, as it probably doesn't even matter whether it's the who left it behind or why. But my thinking is that the most important thing is here, is it a exposed finger with ridge detail, or is it something smeared, left behind by someone wearing a glove of some sort? And I think that's the most important point. And I don't see finger ridge detail there.
No, they don't mention any. I think the only ridge detail is the palm. I think that's mentioned a little bit. I think.
Yeah, and once again, as you mentioned, Greg, there's not much mentioned. And when you take a look, when you take a step back and look at the entirety of this crime scene, there's very little fingerprints left behind.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of blood left behind. Very few fingerprints left behind.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, there's a palm print, but it's very interesting that with all this blood, there's very little fingerprints left on anything, which I think raises the much larger question for the listeners out there.
And to
There should
try,
be fingerprints all over this place.
yeah, there should
If
be.
someone planned and meticulously planned this event and did it themselves, there should be fingerprints all over the house. The fact that there's none is there's hardly any fingerprints here. Very strange. And that's one of the things that you and I think, you and I agree on, Greg, is that what the detectives in this case, seasoned detectives that do this for a living, wouldn't that raise their suspicion to say, why isn't there more fingerprints here in the home? There are none. It appears that the handgun was wiped down. No fingerprints on that. There's a lot of blood around, but there's no fingerprints. There's writing on the wall with no fingerprints. So that's what we're getting at here for the listeners, just to understand the much bigger picture here, that I would think even an armchair investigator would, these kinds of questions would come jumping out to people not even in the industry by saying, there should be fingerprints. Why aren't there fingerprints? In other words, why did the killer wear gloves?
Yep, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because we were talking last night with one of our newer members, William Rail, and we were talking about the blood on the living room wall, and wondering if it's possible that there was other blood that was wiped up first, and then somebody wrote Allahu Akbar on the living room wall. And I wonder if there was a lot of blood, if it's possible. I mean, it's possible, but is it plausible that there was a lot of blood that was wiped up, and this might have been one of the blood spots that was missed? You see around the house, especially next to the kitchen island, it looks like there's like wet drops, almost like somebody was cleaning up something, maybe cleaning up blood, I don't know, cleaning up a spill. Could have been a spill that had nothing to do with it, but that would be some of the other things that I would look for. Also, next to the dog cage in the living room, and I'll pull up just a photo of the house layout, but kind of where we see item 33, there's a dog cage there, and when they move that dog cage, it does look like a bunch of like wet drops, maybe. I don't know what type of cleaner. I mean, maybe listeners can help us with this too. What would you need to clean up blood, and would it leave stains? Would it leave any markings? You know, I used to have green walls, and we would have stains, and even after we cleaned it up, it would still leave these weird puddle drips that I see similar to this house. But I don't see a lot of that in the hallway, but again, we only have certain photos there of that. So
the next paragraph is the office. Blood found on the computer desk, labeled as item 39, was swabbed and collected by Beth Wolf. The item was submitted for nuclear DNA testing. Though the blood was never tested, the item was, quote, retained in its entirety at the BCA lab, end quote. Now, this is very interesting, Greg. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, this is still, it's another one of, well, why wouldn't it be tested, right? I mean, you would think that everything should have been tested.
And maybe we go to the good side here,
Sure.
The positive. What did the detectives do that was correct? So Beth Wolf gets it, she swabs it, collects it, and submits it for nuclear DNA testing. I think she did everything according to her job description perfect. She did what she needed to do. The next sentence, though, which you hit right on the head, is the blood itself was never tested, but it was retained. So I think everything Beth Wolf did here was correct according to a BCA special agent? You know, she submitted it, she swabbed it, and submitted it. What more could she have done? Now, someone along the way made the decision not to get it tested, but it was retained in its entirety. Now, the only thing I can think of here is when you start testing blood that you have blood from a crime scene, which is really your inventory of blood. Once you start using that for DNA testing, that inventory goes down. It's reduced. So if you ever need it later if the case is ever opened, reopened, or reinvestigated down the road, you have that much less blood to use. So I think at this point, the only thing I could, my opinion here would be that they had enough blood to test that they didn't want to test this to use up that inventory. But hey, let's keep it in case we need it down the road. So let's retain it. Is that fair enough statement?
Yeah, I really like the way that you phrase that. It sounds much nicer than how how I was thinking about phrasing it, but that's true. So it is good that they have it, but obviously somebody like me who doesn't know anything about what gets tested, why they test this, why they don't test that, it's that makes sense, and I am very glad that they still have it. I hope that we're
So I
6
think
years
that
later.
if it was tested, it would come back as Comel's, is what I think the officials, what they're leading to here is that they would have expected it to come back as Comel's blood, which wouldn't have really changed anything. But in the meantime, they would have used up that much more blood to get the testing done, and the expense of getting the testing done. So they elected not to test this. But you're right. In our case here with this Crowley case, we don't know if it's a mixture of other people's blood. We don't know if it's David's blood. We don't know whose blood it is because it was never tested. We can assume it was Comel's because, according to the official narrative, David shouldn't have been bleeding at any point during all this. And more than likely it was Comel's. But once again, a triple homicide that comes across the city of Apple Valley, which is very, very strange, very non-common, very unique. One would think that they would spare no expense and no time, expense, or resources in doing all of the investigation, all of the research, getting all their ducks in a row. And here, once again, we're already in chapter 7 of this book, and we've seen this time and time again where they had the option or the opportunity to do additional testing, and it was declined.
Yeah. So Dan, you've shown that once again another thing that they didn't test, item 39. Okay, that's fine. They don't want to test this desk. They don't want to test the blood on this desk here. Okay, that's great. But they're going to test the pen and the notepad, right?
Yeah, and that's what's coming up here in the next couple of paragraphs is very interesting. And once again, to reiterate, Apple Valley, Minnesota has a population of maybe 40 to 45,000 people. It's not that large. They're not dealing with homicides. They're not dealing with large-scale crime. These homicide detectives are not so overly burdened with dealing with homicides nonstop that they're going to say, you know what, let's take a couple shortcuts in this case. We already know who did it.
Well, but
they average one homicide per year.
But this is the BCA's job, right? Or this is where I think we've talked about this previously too. Does the Apple Valley Police decide, or does the BCA choose what does and what doesn't get tested?
Well, I would say that BCA, even if they were the ones doing the investigation, if they came back and said that we did not or choose not to test this blood, that I, as the lead detective, Officer James Gummert in this case, would have pushed back to say, you know what, I think you should test this. And so whether that was done or not, I think they still would have had the option to push forward and to say, I want you to test all of the blood to make sure that we're all on the right same page here. And that's what I do not believe was done.
Right. And it's good that they still have that swab, because maybe someday we can get item 39 along with some other items tested.
Well, correct. If they reopen the case and find out that it's neither David or Comel's or Ranya's blood, then who else's is it? Then we got big issues. But yes, we're glad that they do have it in inventory.
Cool.
Now, item 40. This is on the top of page 58 for those following along in the book. Item 40 is the pen found next to the notepad on the computer desk. Blood found on the grip of the pen was labeled as item 40-1. And so what we have here is the pen taken in, basically identified here in the investigation as item 40. They found the grip of the pen, blood was on it, they labeled it. Now it goes on to say that the pen was not one of the items submitted for nuclear DNA testing. The pen was not one of the 3 latent prints suitable for comparison to David Crowley. So how do we know David used the pen to write on the notepad nearby? And that's where that paragraph ends. Very interesting. They decide to take the blood from the pen, and it looks like it wasn't submitted for nuclear, and the latent prints that were allegedly on there was not suitable for comparison, which means it was either wiped down or was small enough, or someone was perhaps wearing a glove, but there was hardly any prints on that pen that were even suitable for comparison. I would guess David Crowley's fingerprints would be all over that pen.
They should be. They should be. I mean, it's you can look at the image where the pen was. It's nicely and neatly placed. Oh, I'm sure we do this all the time. I'm sure anytime anybody kills people and, then wants to kill themselves, they just go and write a little note and place the pen ever so nicely, so neatly right next to it on the right-hand side, so people know that I'm right-handed. More evidence that David is right-handed here. But again, the most frustrating thing is the thing that the news reports won't tell you, the thing that the Apple Valley Police Department won't comment on, BCA won't talk about, and you won't find it in any Netflix documentary either. Once again, the pen was not tested. It was not tested. That's a problem. That's a big problem. A huge problem here, because I can understand not testing the blood on the desktop next to the pen, but not testing the pen when there's blood on it? That to me
especially when they're trying to link this to a potential suicide note written by the killer.
Right.
Is what they're trying to link here. The narrative they're trying to push is that this is a potential another suicide note, which we also know that this is not. But you're right. The pen is neatly on the right-hand side. This scene leaves all these subliminal messages here, coded messages, that the average person looking at it is not going to understand, but detectives looking at it, they're going to fall right into the trap. It's on the right side. Oh, it's a right-handed person. David's pen, David's office, David's desk, David's notepad. Oh, obviously he wrote it all. So was it tested? No.
I don't understand that. But surely they test other items. They test the notepad. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you would think that they would test 39, 40, and 41 to make sure that all of them match, that the DNA results should all be exactly the same. This would be a slam dunk case to prove David Crowley guilty here. Maybe not, but I mean, that would at least, I think a lot of people would be more open to it, and they would take it more seriously. They would at least try to invest some time into giving the police the benefit of the doubt, like many of us did, until we learned a lot of these clear facts. And then it's like, well, I'd love to just believe whatever the cops tell us. The problem is what they're telling us is not backed by facts. It's backed by fiction, and that's just not good. You don't want to do that in a case like this, where we're talking about they knew who David Crowley was. They knew that what he was talking about. They knew the conspiracies, all of that stuff. So they should have, just based on that, it feels like they should have gone the extra mile to make sure that they proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that David Crowley was guilty. We didn't get any of that. We got bully tactics. We got people making up things, people lying. But we didn't get any truth to show us where the evidence shows that David Crowley is guilty. And the more documents that we got, the more we can see that, they don't have anything to prove David Crowley guilty. So the fact that they didn't test 39, didn't test 40, is a big deal, and I think that a lot of people just don't know. They just don't realize that is a fact, that those two items were not tested.
Correct. Very important. And not even tested, like you say in the book here, is one of the items that wasn't even submitted for nuclear DNA testing. It was never even submitted. Therefore,
Yeah.
it couldn't have even been tested by those in the lab doing the tests because it wasn't even given to them. It was never submitted.
Right. Why not?
Very odd. All right, let's go to the bottom of page 58, starting with item 41.
Okay.
Item 41 is the actual notepad found on the computer desk in the office bedroom. Authorities found the notepad flipped open to page 30 of 59. And so let's cover that a little bit, Greg. The notepad, we have researched that spiral-bound notepad in the office, and it does say that originally that notepad was purchased, it was an 80-page notepad. What they have here is there's 30, this was found on page 30 of the 59 that remain in the spiral notepad. So pages basically 60 through 80 were ripped out, not necessarily in that order, but all the investigators, when they came to the scene, there's only 59 pages left in that spiral-bound notepad. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it was 80 originally, so I know they used that for their budget and some recipes and some notes and things like that. Whether it related to David's business or not, that notebook happened to be in the office. So 59 pages remained, and the way investigators do that, they count page 1 from the first page all the way to the end. The last page was 59. They said that this was flipped open to the 30th page in that notebook, and it said, "Open the Rise most recent version and submit to Allah now." Now, back to the book. On page 30 were two strange, unexplained sentences. The first was, quote, "Open the Rise most recent version." The second message was, "Submit to Allah now." Neither of these two messages were ever labeled as suicide notes by authorities. More importantly, who can prove David wrote the two messages?
Now, what would they need to prove it? What would we need to be satisfied? And more importantly, for any investigators, for any cops out there, ask yourself this. What would you need to prove David Crowley wrote this here? What test would you... The
common answer would be a handwriting analysis test that proves that David was the author of these two messages. But we have a problem with this, Greg, because there was no handwriting analysis done on this notepad. Now, it looks like David's writing. It appears to be David's writing. And by looking at it myself, to the naked eye, it does appear that David wrote it. But that's not good. That's not good enough. That's not good for a court of law to bring up in a case. You need to have evidence. Did David write this? I don't know. That's the question. Who wrote the messages?
And we got...
According to the... Yeah, here's the other pages he's showing you. Different bills, budget, monthly budget that him and Comel used for utility bills.
That they both wrote in, apparently. We only have 24 pages, too, which is another interesting thing. They made clear that there were 59 pages, so we didn't get every page that we should have, that they have. I don't know why certain pages were excluded. The only reason that I can think of, the only valid reason, is because they were just blank. But obviously,
I'm guessing the same thing. The blank ones they wouldn't have a need to photograph or make copies of, I don't think.
But that would have been easier for them if they already had it in a file. All 59 pages. They must have had it in a digital file. Instead of giving us the digital file, they had to go through it first and pick what pages they wanted to give us and not give us. Which is a problem there too. I don't know if that's legal. I don't know if that's necessary, to be honest with you. But this book did start, like Dan said, this was a 80-page sheet. There were 80 sheets, 6 by 9, and you can see at the bottom of this looks like it was started out as a budget book. You can see, they're paying close attention to their budgets here. Only a couple pages are the actual budgets, but if you look at the bottom, you'll kind of note these 41A-1, those are the page numbers, and you'll see this F means that it is the front. So you'll see F on some of these pages, and then you'll see B on some of these pages to show it's front and then back. But both, David,
I think the interesting thing is here, Greg, is that we look at someone who's new to the case will read the police report and say, boy, this was a family struggling with finances. He killed himself. End of story. Problem solved.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when citizen investigators file FOIA requests for the FOIA and get back reports like this that show page after page after page of family budget, estimated due dates, when bills should be paid, what we see here is very high level attention to detail for utility bills, monthly bills. This really actually, other than this one page, Open the Rise, that the official narrative is using to claim David as the killer, the other pages all are huge support for these guys being very frugal with their finances and being very disciplined is what I see in this notebook.
Yeah.
Which is a very different story than what we see as the official narrative.
That's right. And of course, there is blood. You can clearly see that there's blood on these pages here. Like this is actually, it's another interesting thing that this is the back, and I know we'll get more deep into what's in the notepad on our follow-up show to this one here, but this was kind of weird too, because where the Submit to Allah, Open the Rise Now, it's actually written on the back of one of the pages, of page 30 here. So I thought that was kind of interesting too, to write it on the back, not necessarily on the front, like I would kind of assume, but then there's blood. There's lots of blood here on a lot of these different pages, so obviously when they did not test it, it really stands out because everybody, I would think, okay, it's very easy. Let's go ahead and let's look at this. Let's figure out, whose blood. Let's do some writing samples. And like you said, it was like none of that was done. They had their killer. They had their story. They had their theory, which is all that they have, by the way. It's just a theory, a very weak theory too. And as we go on, that's the only reason this podcast is even here is because of how weak their theory is. So
I think that one could argue also that the notepad here is a mistake by the real killers, because they could have had David write that, tear that page out and leave that on the desk for the officers to see right next to the pen. Problem solved. But what they did was they did not tear it out. They left it there in and amongst all of these other very disciplined budgets and notes and how much things are and how much things are going to be each month and did they pay them, nice and neat schedules. One could argue that the killers made a mistake by leaving it in there.
It's true.
So, but Open the Rise, for the newer people following this case, The Rise was a documentary David was working on that was like a sister project to The Gray State. And The Rise was a documentary. It had versions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's multiple versions. And so that's what he means here is what they're alluding to. Open the Rise, most recent version, is a note meant for the reader, whoever was the intended reader, to open to the most recent version. And so there was multiple versions. David was finishing up The Rise, that documentary, and one of his goals was to have that done by the end of the year. I think December 31st, 2014 was his goal to get that done and actually released for free on YouTube by the end of the year. And so why would he leave a note that says, Open the Rise, most recent version? And so was that a to-do list for him the next morning to get up and work on that. But right beneath there is submit to Allah now, and there is blood smears on that page.
Doesn't add up.
So very interesting. Now the next page, we're on page 59. The bloody visual ridge detail was found on the following pages. 41A. So this book, this notebook was 41. The notepad was item 41. So all these are going to have 41. So 41A-30. The back of that page had ridge detail. 41A-31 front and back. 41A-31-1. 41A-32 front of the page. 41A-33 front of the page. 41A-34 front with possible RD, which is ridge detail. And then finally 41A/58 back. And there's only 59 pages in that book, so it's the second to the last page. There was ridge detail found on the back of that page. What do we have for notes there, Greg?
Yeah, I think this is where we kind of see that he's flipping through these pages, right? Whoever, if this is David with bloody fingerprints, which would make sense if this maybe was one of the last things that he wrote, because, you know, if he's supposed to have written the living room wall, we know there's blood there. Obviously, we know there's blood on the laptop in the kitchen. And so what I found interesting about where the ridge detail was is he's flipping. They're flipping to a certain page here. Not just like opening up just one page. Okay, I'm just going to write this here. It's multiple pages. And throughout this case, especially recently in the last couple months, what I've been looking for, if there was a hostage situation in this house, what type of clues would David leave? What type of clues would he know to leave? So that's speculation, 100%. I'm totally speculating on that. But the fact that there isn't just one, like he just, you know, he's gone crazy, he's in this mode, and he picks up the pen and he writes this. That's not what's happening here. He's flipping through pages. Someone is flipping through multiple pages to get to a certain page. It's a staged crime scene. It's meant to, there is a purpose to this, to going to this certain page here. What was written on these pages could have already been there. And somebody is just using fingers, just using things to flip through it. But who the hell does that? Why flip through anything? Are you checking other notes? Are you looking at things? Oh, I'm just going to flip through these pages to see what's bloody, to see what's not. And it's not like it's on all of them either. But they spend a lot of time here. They spend a lot of time on the notebook. So obviously we would expect to find, and we'll talk about that as we go on here, that they tested the notebook to see whose blood and everything is on it. We know that there is blood on it. There's no doubt there. We know that there's ridge detail, that they're finding it there. But it's just kind of left open about why is it on these certain pages and why is it on so many pages? And this is just the ones that they could use, you know, to show that there was bloody ridge detail. This wouldn't include any spots, any little specks of blood that they found on other pages there. So that really stood out to me for those reasons.
So next on the reading down of the paragraph, it mentions basically that items on page 35, 36, and 37 had minimal apparent blood on the bottom edges. BCA analyst Jennifer Kostrowski's notes dated July 14th, 2015 states she spoke with Joe Cooksley about which items should be processed for latent prints. Kostrowski was told, quote, it was sufficient to only process pages with RD, ridge detail in apparent blood. Other pages return to item packaging, no LP processing on item 41. LP is latent prints. So once again, she said, I've got them collected. I've got some prints. Which one should be processed? And basically, Cooksley says that only process the ones that have ridge detail in blood. If there's blood and there's ridge detail, let's process those. Let the others go.
And no latent print processing on item 41.
Yeah, no latent print processing on item 41. So item 41 again is the notepad. Interesting. Now, results of the alternate light source examination were conclusive. Quote, examinations of the front and back cover of the notebook, item 41, and the 59 pages that were originally within the notebook, items 41A1 through 41A59, failed to reveal any latent writing material, end quote. So really no latent prints in the entire notebook.
So again, we're not seeing
including
anything.
The front and back cover.
Right, which there should be, because there is blood on the front and back cover. So if there is, then it wasn't like this page was opened here. It wasn't opened and then somebody wrote open the rise. This to me shows that the notepad at some point was closed, maybe even possibly closed first, and maybe not even left here on this table here. But these are just all strange things that by themselves, you're like, oh, okay, maybe that casts a little hole. When you add them all up, that's where you can really see. Once again, it's like, okay, we're waiting for any evidence. Where is it? Where is it? And here we are. They've gone through this, and actually, if you read some of these notes, and they're in order mostly. If you read the BCA 488 document, if you read the notes, that's what you're going through. You're waiting. They're waiting to process these, to look at this, to see, okay, here is where we found, David Crowley is guilty, and we're waiting, and it just never happens. It never comes. So these 59 pages, it just does not happen like that. There might be a little bit. There might be something here that we'll see as we read on, but what they process, what they don't process is a very big deal. It's a big deal.
Continuing on, item 41-1 is blood found on the front cover of the notepad. This could mean the notepad was closed before the two messages written. The item never and time again in. Now, item 41-2 was blood found on page 30 of the notepad. 2 sentences were written on that page. Once again, open the Rise, most recent version, and submit to Allah now. The blood on this page contained a mixture, keyword mixture, of 2 or more individuals, with the major DNA profile matching Comel. David and Rania were excluded from being possible contributors to the blood tested on page 30. So who is the source of the other DNA profile or profiles? Period. Now, Greg, this may be one of the most important sentences in your entire book. There's blood on the notepad. They find blood, they do a DNA, they find it's a mixture of multiple people. One is Comel, makes sense. Comel's blood is all over that house.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the second? They test Rania, who was also killed, it's not hers. They test David, who was also killed, it's not his. So my question is, who else was bleeding in that house? That to me is a huge question. But it wasn't it wasn't further research, right?
Nope. There's nothing in these documents, nowhere that shows that they found that out and they did something to find this other DNA profile or the other DNA profiles, because it's, they say a mixture of two or more. So that means it could be other people too.
So it's other people's blood. The question is, who else was in the house? Who else was bleeding in that house? And why wasn't it investigated? Now, this could be one reason and one reason alone to reinvestigate the case or to reopen the case.
That's right. And this is not the first time that we've seen, this unknown DNA source or sources.
Correct.
Could be multiple sources there too. But this also shows why we need to look for, if somebody was bleeding, they could have been bleeding in multiple places of that house, and that blood could have been wiped up, could have been cleaned up. So again, I would ask, what type of thing, what would you need to clean up that house? What to clean up blood? Bleach? I don't know. That would definitely stain. That would leave some type of a residue on the on those walls. I would think, I would hope, but the fact that we have here now 2 points so far that we've gone through that show that there were other DNA sources. We have other people in that house who are, like you said, who are bleeding, who are possibly wounded, and there's no follow-up on that. That is definitely suspicious activity. That is definitely proof of somebody else being in the house. Those are 2 clear, simple things. Who is reading the DNA reports? When the BCA realizes that they have DNA sources that are unknown, is it their job to further investigate that, or is it just their job to pass it on to the Apple Valley? And is it the Apple Valley's job to further investigate that? Somebody should have. And at this point, we don't know who dropped the ball on that, and I'm not clear whose responsibility is that, or is it all of their responsibility?
Well, I think you start with the lead detective, Officer James Gummert, in this case. If the BCA did their job to say, I'm not saying that they didn't, I'm saying that they did. They did do the job. They did the testing. They found out that it was Comel's blood along with someone else.
Right.
How does that phone call get made, or how does that email get sent? How does that information get back to the lead detective for that lead detective then to either take action or basically just deny it or decline it or not take an action at all? James Gummert, I'm assuming, received that information and decided to do nothing with it. That's where I think the issue comes from. I would be willing to bet that detectives underneath James Gummert who are working this case, this is probably news to them. So my question is, or my statement would be this: I would guess, because in the world of law enforcement and police circles, things work in chain of command. Someone from the BCA would inform the Apple Valley Police Department, and I think that would be the lead person. Gummert would get the information by saying, we did find DNA, it was Comel's blood, but it's a mixture of one or more other individuals. In fact, we've done the research and we've ruled out David and we've ruled out Rania. I think that's all the job of the BCA is to give that information. From then, on that point, they transferred it. The ball essentially is in the court of Apple Valley Police to say, hey, let's research to find whose blood this is. Mm-hmm. That was never done. My question is, when Gummert receives that information, did he pass that along and investigators look into it, or did he not pass that along and the detectives to this day don't even know it? Which I think then would be, if that was the case, That would be his negligence on his part of not doing his job.
Yeah,
so maybe they did pass it on, and they say, you know what, we're not going to do anything further with this. But we have to look at it from the terms of a cover-up. If it was, who covered it up? How was it covered up? And how do things like this not get investigated? Was Gummert given the information and told by his superior, the police chief, for example, to say, you're not going to do anything with this? And Gummert, obedient as he is, says, sounds good, boss. We won't do anything more with this. I could easily see that happening. But that's still a cover-up. That's still you, Gummert, not doing your job. I know you're taking orders. I know you're obedient to your commanding officer. But your job is to protect and serve the citizens of Apple Valley. That's the oath you took. That's the oath you took. So we still have a problem there. Did he pass it on to his detectives and research? Did he not pass it on? And did he knowingly not pass it on? Was he told not to pass it on? That investigation was not over. The detectives did not complete their job. But if those detectives currently are listening to this program and never heard of such a thing, they didn't know there are multiple DNA, that's where my issue lies on my end. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking that's how cover-ups are successfully handled in cases like this. They're not given to the next level down. The next level down is not aware of it. I don't think they'd have a meeting and say, you know what, there's more than Kamel's blood on this. Guys, what should we do? And you know what? Let's all just agree to say nothing in case. Let's get our story straight. We're not going to say anything. I don't think that's how it's done. I think that information is suppressed from the detectives doing the work. And it's suppressed at the sergeant level, at the manager level, or perhaps by someone above him telling him to suppress that information. That's how things like this are successfully covered up, because chain of command. It's all about the chain of command. Mm-hmm. But I do believe, Greg, to come back to your original question, that the BCA did their job in that respect. They did what they did. They found the answers, and they forwarded on to the investigation. And it's up to them, I guess, to take the ball and run with it. And if Apple Valley chose not to do anything about that, I don't think anyone in the BCA is losing sleep today because they know there was more than one person's blood on that notebook, and Apple Valley chose not to do anything. I don't think they'll say that's not, how's that my problem?
Right.
Which is also wrong.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big stain on all of them. The fact that we have, it's such a horrible crime here that we know has happened. We have 3 dead people, very young people, including a 5-year-old child. And I think all of us just kind of, we wanted to think that the investigation would be thorough, as they had told us, as we have heard from the investigators, as we have heard from Kenneth Maines, as we have heard from Eric Nelson, as we have heard from all of the fictitious writers who have covered this case and want to think that David Crowley is guilty. They make it sound like there was a very thorough investigation done here. It sounds like the family, the friends, also think that there was a very thorough investigation done here. I think in these 12 shows that we've done so far, and we're not even halfway through my book, by the way, but just in these 12 shows, I think we've without a shadow of a doubt, proven that this was not a thorough investigation, that this family needs a thorough investigation, and that one of the main reasons to get this case reopened is so that we get a thorough investigation. I don't think that's too much to ask for, especially in such a clear-cut case like this. When we talk about things that were tested and weren't tested, we're saying the blood on the desk was not tested. The pen was not tested. The front cover for the notepad was not tested. They did test the page 30, which is good, as they should have, but it's what they found when they tested page 30, that there is another DNA source. There is someone else, at least one or two other people here. Can you picture if they would have tested, they call this item 41-2 is page 30. What if they would have tested item 41-1, which is the front cover? What if they would have tested the bloody ridge detail that they have on page 30, page 31, the back of page 31, the front of page 32, the front of page 33, the front of page 34, the back of page 58? What if they would have tested that? Would they have found the same thing that they found with item 41-2, page 30? Would they have found the same thing, that we have evidence of somebody else's blood at that crime scene? Would that have forced them to do something?
Correct. And I think the whole thing, it really comes down to refusing to reopen the case is more about saving the reputation and the credibility of the Apple Valley Police Department. Boy, if this case gets reopened, this would be one of the first things exposed, and right off the bat, it's going to be a major, major embarrassment. Now, the offset to that is, you and I, Greg, can't reopen the case. We're not family members. But those listening to the podcast who are family members, this could be enough to reopen the case. And I'm talking directly to the Alam family, not the direct family. I'm not talking about the mother, brother, or sister. If you're a cousin, relative, and you wanted this case reopened, you would have a far greater chance of doing that just by presenting this one piece of evidence. Same with the Crowley family. I'm not asking Dan Jr., Dan Sr., or Allison to reopen the case. I know that's not going to happen. But there are relatives, cousins, and loved ones of the family that could take a case like this and have it be reopened because you are part of the family. We're not talking immediate family. But you can have a case reopened if you're family. You'd have much greater success. This would be the case right there. And I would think that members of the Crowley and Alam family, knowing that there was someone else in that house bleeding, I think that would probably be a priority for them to get this case investigated. Because right now it seems to me they're not interested in knowing who else was bleeding in that house. And that I cannot get my head around.
Well said. That's all I got for this one, brother.
That's all I've got too, Greg. Thanks for your time. This is a good, very interesting chapter. In the next episode, number 13, we'll conclude chapter 7 on this office bedroom. But that's all I've got for today.
Awesome. All right. Well, then, until next time, we'll come back and we'll focus more on the notepad and everything else that we haven't covered related to that. Until then, I'm going to go ahead and shut this live stream down, and thank you all again for joining us.
Well, welcome to episode 13, talking about the book, The Gray Stage, authored by Greg Fernandez, Jr. We'll be joined with him today along with Sophia, Stephen, myself, Dan Hennon, and Greg Fernandez. How is everyone doing today?
Lovely.
Doing great.
Fantastic. Great.
We've got an interesting topic today here, January 31st, 2021. We'll be doing chapter 7 of the book. It's concerning the office bedroom, part 2. And for those of you following along in the actual softcover book, we'll be starting today's podcast on the bottom of page 60. And the whole chapter is dedicated to the office bedroom. And with the Crowley home, it's where David Crowley had his office. It was an extra bedroom, and that's what we'll be covering today. So once again, bottom of page 60. I'll start off here with the text. Regarding the latent print examinations, item 41A-30 is page 30 of the notepad. LP 41A30-1 is a latent impression, parentheses, finger/palm, observed on page 30. Latent print results were, quote, inconclusive to Crowley due to the limited quality and quantity of information in the latent and known prints, end quote. Similarly, item 41A/31 is page 31 of 59. LP 41A31-1 is a latent fingerprint on page 31, which was identified as David's left middle finger. This is the only conclusive connection between David and the notepad. So what are our thoughts there on that first section, guys?
Well, my first thought was, what is a latent print? So as I'm reading this and I'm going through this, I did pull up a little kind of example here, and I'll take a step back, of what a latent print is. A latent print is an impression of the friction skin of the fingers or palm of the hands that has been transferred to another surface. The permanent and unique arrangement of the features of the skin allows for the identification of an individual to a latent print. So maybe Stephen, maybe you have some thoughts on this. How important in a case like this, how important is a latent print?
Well, it's very important, especially when there's blood found at a crime scene, and it's not splattered or spotted, but evidently been wiped or transferred to another object or a wall or material. And it depends on the texture and such like that, but it's often sometimes the most important, crucial piece of evidence.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of one of my issues was obviously what they do test, what they don't test, but they have these two latent prints. And it was kind of weird to me that on page 30, which is where this, open the rise, submit to Allah now, that apparently David wrote, even though nobody can prove David wrote it, they can't tie his latent prints to that. But there is a latent print that they do tie to this, to David, and that is on the next page. So that kind of makes me think, okay, page 31, maybe this was open to page 31. So I've got an image up here. This is page 30, and you can see that this is actually the back of page 30. You can tell that by the B on the lower left-hand side here. That's where the B is. That's why it's 41A-30, 41 being the actual notepad. And then they have all of this this picture on the right hand side is kind of shows what they're looking at. It shows that they did do some research. They didn't just say, okay, we'll take a couple samples of the print. Now looking at these prints, I guess you could say that the one up here in the upper left, which is the one that was swabbed, this is the one that was probably used, but it's inconclusive. And so that was interesting, where you have one, maybe two, maybe three or four. I mean, Stephen, looking at this photo, how many good samples here do you see of those latent prints? I see maybe three, maybe four.
Well, also, what we see is not what's on there. They've got to do some it's a dye analysis test to pick up what they can't see with their eyes. So there's more. If there's 3, there might be 10.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Does any of these look darker, or could you tell which one might have been first, second, third?
I guess I'm not an expert at this,
Yeah.
but if you look at his handwriting, it's where he would start maybe a letter or open a page or turn a page. What he touched first to do that. Definitely the notepad is something they should re-examine.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's just like on the left hand too. So all of this that we're seeing here,
Mm-hmm.
whether this is all from the left hand, all 1, 2, 3, 4 of these fingerprint surface images. It's all on the left side. No indication of the right hand side as far as I can see. Looks like there's no blood on his right hand, even though there's supposed to be blood on that pin. So depending on where the blood would be on the person's right hand, would be curious to me. Basically what I'm trying to figure out is, how do we know that this was written after there was blood involved on these pages? Is there any way to tell whether these two sentences were written before, after? To me, I think, I just always kind of think, well, I think these were written first, and then there was blood involved, which doesn't make any sense, obviously, but that's par for the course on this case.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed it a couple of interviews back. It's a very sloppy crime scene.
Mm-hmm. It is. But looking at the image on the right, at least we see that they've tried, right? They've seen, they took some notes on this page. On the actual document, it looks like, I don't know if they actually wrote these notes on this document, or if they wrote, if they did like a photocopy and then wrote their notes. Okay, open, it's up, down. I can't really tell on that. I would assume that they're different, because if you look at where the 41A30 is on the left-hand side, and then you compare that to where the 41A30 is on the right-hand side, they're obviously in two separate places. This 41A30 on the left-hand side was written on the actual note page. Once the note pages were all taken out of the notepad, this was actually written on that. I don't know if that was a good idea or not, but again, I'm not a police officer. Sophia, do you have any thoughts on anything with this writing here that we're seeing? I mean, any thoughts at all on any of the stuff we've talked about so far? 2 sentences we've only covered. 2 paragraphs.
Well, my question is, was he flipping with his left hand with the blood? Because they found blood on the front, and then they found it on the back, right?
Yes. Found blood here on the front. Well, actually, this page would be the back of page 30.
Okay.
Which is weird. I don't know who writes on the back of a page, but yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of strange.
Yeah, if you're right-handed, do you normally flip with your left hand?
Yeah, if I'm on a notepad, yeah, I could see that. I could see that flip. Okay. I mean, it's kind of hard. I mean, I might flip first with my right hand and then write with my right hand, but that's a good question. I haven't really thought too much about that.
Mm-hmm.
The writing is fast. I noticed that they wrote down here, and then somewhat careless. I don't know exactly what they mean by somewhat careless.
Isn't the writing, like Dan had brought up earlier in his examination, your interview, that the difference between the shopping list and such? I mean, it looks like somebody was in a hurry. I mean, to me, it looks like different handwriting.
Yeah, it does.
It definitely does, and I mean, like you say, you need experts. But I mean, even as novices can just look at some of the turns and everything on the angle of the writing. I mean, it's not as meticulous as the other lists.
Well, there is some of the handwriting, and we can definitely go through the notepad, some of the stuff that's on that notepad after we talk about all of this stuff here too. But sure. his wife did write in this book too, so they're both writing in this book, and it's kind of weird.
Okay.
It's kind of like it starts off as a budget book. It looks like maybe his wife is writing it, and then it gets into his notes, and he is writing about his script and the book and some ideas, and then it kind of goes back to his wife's cookbooks, her recipes and stuff like that. So there's really no rhyme or reason why this is there, or trying to understand the whole theory about why David opened this up, where this was, he picked it out, why did he put it here, and none of that is really covered. The police don't really go there. It just seems like it's David's, they don't even, they're very cautious to connect any of this to David, really, if you really look at it. But I think once they find David's left middle finger, his latent print, obviously that's the best. That's all that they would need, according to their theory. And this is page 31. This is also the back of page 31 here, and this is the one that has David's left middle finger on it. This is 41A-31. And this is found in the office bedroom. It is a latent fingerprint. It belongs to David. It's his left middle finger. It ties David to blood, not to his blood, but to blood. There's blood on his hand, and it ties David to the notepad. Now, this is their best case. If I was, a cop, if I was a lawyer for the police, I'd say this is it. But this is your slam dunk case here, with his left hand. I don't know. It's just weird. This is their case right here. If I don't see anything else. There's absolutely nothing else. So, but looking at the stuff that's on this page here too, because, let's talk about this a little bit. Because the latent print, they were able to conclusively tie this latent print to David, whereas on page 30 they weren't able to tie any of these latent prints to David. Does that suggest that David was here, that he opened this page before he opened page 30? If that makes sense.
Yeah, possibly.
I mean, wherever there's more blood, wherever there's more of a latent print, I would assume that would mean, I would put that one first, right? And think, okay, if why would there be a latent print here on page 31, but then it's inconclusive on page 30? He had to have been here first, is my thinking. And it's just very interesting about just everything that's on this page here, what he was doing, what he was looking at. This also looks fast. This looks a lot faster than anything that we see here. This looks slower to me. If I were to compare the writing on page 30 to page 31, page 31 looks like he's thinking. He's like, okay, I got all these notes, blah, blah, blah. This is what I'm going to cover. My view on what we're seeing here on page 31 is that this is all stuff that was meant to go into the rise. So maybe there is a connection. And I don't know. I don't know if this is his handwriting. I can't say conclusively that it is or that it's not. I don't have any expertise in that field. I was hoping that the investigators would be able to tie the handwriting to David, but they're not. The only thing they tie to David is the blood on this page, not his handwriting. You could say, well, if you look at it, it looks the same, so that's it. Case closed. Well, it's not. That's what forgeries. That's maybe we need an expert in forgeries, to kind of go through these and compare these two pages, these two writings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dan, any thoughts on any of this here?
Yeah, it looks like, this list here is, what we're seeing here on his list is brainstorming for things that ended up in the Rise, the actual documentary, not the Grace State. And then it does appear that, his blood is on that, which is fair enough. And then maybe this was the page it was opened to. One theory is if he was forced to write this at gunpoint, he grabbed this notebook where it was open to this page, flipped it back a page, and we ended up on page 30, where he already may or may not have already had the word "Open the Rise" most recent version. Some have speculated that was written a long time ago, and then with a gun to his head, they just said, write "Submit to Allah now," and so he did it, writing very fast, writing very sloppy. And his blood is on there. And so
that's the question. Did he write it on his own? I don't think "Submit to Allah Now" would ever be something David Crowley ever would have written ever. And so the question is, why is it written, and was he forced to write it? And all we have from the rest of the case is this anti-Muslim things going on in the home, the Quran, Allah Akbar, and this. And so all three are tied to this crime scene in an effort to, steer people away from the truth. As far as this is a distraction. So this is just more distraction. Did David write it? I don't know. It looks like he did. Investigators can't prove it, and there's nothing on the pencil or the pen, and then there's some blood here, which was David's fingerprint, so he was bleeding. So I would say that he did write it. He was bloody. The question is, was he forced to? And if so, why? If he was doing this, we already know David did not commit the murder of himself for sure. We never found the bullet. So the question is, who else was in that house, and does that someone else or other person or persons have something to do with the writing on this notepad here, where it was left right out in the open so investigators would find it first thing, right at the desk, right there, open conveniently to this page, "Submit to Allah Now." It still ties back into the whole corny situation with this anti-Muslim angle that someone is trying to insert into this case. That's the question.
Well, also as I pulled up, I compared the notepad, "Submit Allah Now," and the handwriting, and in the notebook is capital A, kind of lowercase AH, and if you look at the wall, everything's in capital letters, Dan. This is two different people. You have creatures of habit. Yeah, we might start with a capital, yeah. But I go to lowercase. I look at my writing, it's pretty consistent, no matter how I write it, whether it's on a wall or whatever.
And so I've done an episode of that previously with the handwriting analysis, just looking at the handwriting found in the house, in the home, on the wall, on the gift packages and things like that. And the first thing we did was, to deduce the fact that David probably didn't write anything on that wall in blood with his own hand. It looks like a left-handed person wrote it. Maybe some of the letters from a right-handed person, but it looked left-handed. And it looks like written by someone who likes to write in all caps. The only person on the scene that likes to write in all caps was Dan Crowley Jr., which is his brother. And so the only time I brought up that scenario, people had assumed that I am suspecting that Danny killed the family. And what I was saying is, it looks like Danny wrote on the blood on the wall. He may or may not have been involved in the killing of the family. We don't know that. But my first bet would be that Dan Jr. was the responsible for writing on the wall, because the gift wrap Christmas presents are all written in all uppercase. The A's match the H's, the L's, the gift wrap presents, the way he writes Merry Christmas and Uncle Danny and whatnot. It looked almost exactly like Dan Crowley Jr., the brother, wrote the blood writing on the wall. It was performed by him, would be my guess. There may have been more people involved, but it was for sure by him. Now the question is, why is he in the house? Now what we see here is lowercase, but then we get the word "now" in all uppercase, and it looks like it's written fast or quickly, or like they wrote, "writing is fast." And so, who knows if this was written by someone to make it look like David's handwriting, which could also be the case. The only person we have connected to this case with forgery so far is Dan Crowley Jr. with a banknote where he's signing his father's name and signature of his father. So we only have one case of forgery really to look at. And so if this is a forgery to make it look like David wrote it, our first suspect would be Dan Crowley Jr. once again. So I don't know if David wrote it or if it was made to look like it was David's writing, but it's odd to say the least. And in both of these scenarios, I've come to the conclusion that Dan Crowley Jr. was involved in both of these. And the only other thing that's Muslim related is that Quran. And so if he was responsible for this whole distraction side of things, and other people committed the murder or the crimes themselves, it still places him there at the scene. And so that's the much more disturbing thing we've got to deal with. But yes, it does look like someone either wrote it to make it look like someone else wrote it, someone tried to forge it, or someone wrote it fast, someone wrote it quickly, maybe two different people wrote it. I still don't know, myself, if as far as the killings are concerned, if the comment opened the rise to the most recent version, why is that in here at all? And so the question is, was that part of David Crowley's notepad that he had already previously written as just a note to himself, perhaps a to-do list for some morning when he got up to open up that new version as a note to himself, and then the killers just had him write "Submit to Allah now" below that? Or was it part of the whole distraction, open the rise? I don't get the connection. The "Submit to Allah now" ties in with the Muslim distraction that we've seen in this case.
Yeah.
But I don't know if "Open the Rise" most recent version has anything to do with anything. And if it was meant to have something, if it was meant as a code or a message, then what exactly is that? To me, that's confusing.
Yeah, it really is. You kind of look at the way that the rise kind of rises, the text rises off of each line, whereas the open is kind of the same. There's a lot of things like that kind of make me wonder. You look at the submit, that's kind of rising from left to right. That handwriting is kind of rising, whereas Allah and then now are pretty much kind of lined up. But the other thing that I think people should kind of look at is looking at where the fingerprints were, because I kind of thought, okay, well, you have the fingerprint. The reason why there's blood on the left side here is because he's writing with his right hand, or the person is writing with their right hand, and the left hand is bloody. When you look at the table where the notepad is, there's a lot of blood on the left-hand side that could correspond to a bloody left hand. Whereas when you look at the right side of that table, where items 39, 40, and 41 are, where the pen, the notepad, and then the big pool of blood that's next to this notepad, there's really nothing. There's no blood on the right hand side, except for that pen, obviously. So I just, thinking about this, take your left hand and try to write this here. And as you do, with that blood, with these blood spots that we're seeing here, would those blood spots correspond to somebody using their left hand to write this? Or, would there be more blood if they were using their left hand? But when I kind of do it, and the reason why I do this is to see, okay, well, if they only find the left middle finger, and not on this page, on page 31, they find the left middle finger, but it's all on the left-hand side. There's really no blood on the right-hand side of these pages that we are looking at here. So it does make me wonder about the left-hand theory, the left-hand man, which reminds me of, I can't remember what that movie was, The Left-Hand Man. Oh, that's going to bother me now. It'll come back to me. It's a TV show. You guys have to know this TV show. Left-Hand Man.
Well, it's my impression that with David flipping through with his left hand, and especially with the now part, it just seems like it was written with his left hand. Now, I mean, I can't prove it, but everything about that just seems off. And I don't know, just the whole case.
The whole thing is off. I was thinking of a TV series called The Fugitive. There was a movie made on that too, where it's like this guy is basically he's framed for a crime, and he knows that it's a left-handed man who actually did it. Pretty interesting. way off topic, but just kind of looking at some of those things to understand. And it's like another thing is, yeah, like how Dan was saying, it's they made sure to open the Rise, the most recent version, right? That's the one that we want people to focus on. And what is the most recent version? If we look at it, it hadn't been finished yet. So is the most recent version the one that was leaked right after David Crowley died, which is a rough cut version? Or do they want us to look at the most recent version, which is the one that came out after his death, that was made by people who think that David Crowley is guilty? It's pretty interesting, especially when we know for a fact that they were trying to make money off of the most recent version after David died. So while they're accusing David of this crime, they are also trying to make money off of this project that is created by someone that they believe is a child killer. It just like Sophia said, it doesn't make sense. Go ahead.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Greg. It's almost like a promotional piece kind of thrown in here as an Easter egg to drive attention to the investigators to this, and also those following the case to drive traffic to that new documentary.
Right.
It's like a little product placement here in the crime scene. That could be, who knows? There was, the Greg was saying, and that is correct, there was multiple versions of The Rise, which was a documentary that was basically all David and Sean Wright. And then once we saw the later versions and the later cuts, specifically the most recent one, it was really more of a Sean Wright version than David. So it fell away from the David piece, and the most recent version also did have the Sean Wright text information, talk, interviews on that version. It's that they've been edited out and canceled out. So, if Sean Wright was part of this, the killings, it would have made sense that he didn't want anyone to look at the previous versions of that, and because those would have sent him to prison. And so the most recent one does not have him going to prison. So who knows? But it's odd that it's in there. But yes, they were going to sell that and sell that in stores as a DVD documentary, a 90-minute documentary that people could buy online or buy in the stores, and they would have made some money on it. I think Sean Wright and Danny August Mason were waiting for these months to go by and these years to finally cash in and get paid for some of the work and the hours that they put into this project. Not only the Gray State, but The Rise. Sean Wright put hours and hours of editing and time into this, and I don't even know if he was employed full-time during this time. He was having tough times financially and was waiting for this to be sold. And then that month of December, when all this went down, is when David says, you know what, I'm going to release it online for free, just to throw it out there to the public. And that's what I think what David was doing, was yanking the chain of those around him to see what kind of response he'd get. And that's what really got, I think, some of these people in his inner circle pissed off when he says, I'm just going to release it for free. I'll just do it myself. We're not going to make any money on this. And by this time, I think David had already understood that the people closest to him in his inner circle were the actual snakes he'd been trying to avoid for the previous years, and the bad guys were all within his midst. And that's when he figured out, I think, the walls were closing in on him around Christmas time, and he set that deadline for Danny August Mason to get his legal paperwork in. He set the deadline to release The Rise on December 31st, I think. Right before the new year, he was going to release it, publish it just for free. And then I think that's when the whole Gray State team had to put some plan of action into action to end the life of David Crowley. Too many things were not going in their direction.
Yeah, and why would Sean think that he was going to go to jail for that? All that ended up happening was what should have happened is you don't pay your taxes, you get fined. But unless you're like at an untouchable level, or you think you are, why would you think that you're going to go to jail because you foolishly put in a documentary? Nobody forced him to do it. He put it in there, just yapping, talking about not paying taxes. But how many people do we know that have gone to jail for not paying their taxes, aside from one very influential
Well,
mafia
I think the difference in the taxes is this: there's the ruling the ruling on federal income taxes versus the ruling on the state income taxes. And so the Rise was talking about the documentary that the IRS and the Federal Reserve is all a fraud anyway, and individuals do not have to pay income taxes, and we never should have had to pay federal income taxes. Now that's a fact. That is true. I think if you do go to court, you will win that case every time, because nowhere does it state that individuals need to pay federal income taxes anywhere. That's reserved and earmarked for companies, corporations only. Well, Sean wasn't paying the federal, and he was not even filing his state income taxes. And I think he was doing that to protest paying any income taxes. Well, each state, you have to still pay your income taxes, whether you agree or not with the federal income taxes. And I think he found this out after the fact, when he was then later charged with failing to pay state income taxes. And that's what he told me over the phone, that if this gets out, he could be facing up to, was it 70 months or 70 years in prison? He said something about prison time for not doing his taxes, and he could not afford to let this out because he had a young child at the time and didn't have a job, and this was going to ruin him. So it related to the state, and that's where he was charged with and pled guilty to not paying state and the Minnesota state income taxes. Federal had nothing to do with it. I think that's why he was very cavalier in getting that information out on the documentary and doing that interview and basically admitting that he didn't pay taxes. But I think someone pulled him aside later and says, make sure you clarify that it's federal, not state. And he just said, I don't pay taxes at all. And so that opened up the door that he needed to have that interview then wiped out of that final version. And that's what he told me that he was so upset about, that David was going to release the full version and was going to send him to jail, which may or may not be the case. I don't know of many people going to jail for any kind of tax problem. You're going to be facing community service or fines or something to that effect, but typically not going behind bars. But Sean Wright was definitely afraid of going to jail, and that's what he was facing, which still doesn't make sense to me. But I think that to clarify the taxes, one needs to understand the federal versus the state side, and Sean got hung up and was charged with the state failing to file or failing to pay his state income taxes in the state of Minnesota.
But never for federal?
Nope, I don't think anyone charged him federal.
How is that possible? Unless he's an informant or something like that. I don't know. I don't know how all that works. I pay my taxes. I pay over taxes. I don't
Correct.
want. I don't need.
And I do too, my federal taxes. But I also know and have understood the rule that individuals do not ever have to pay federal income taxes. Ever.
There was a great film by Aaron Russo on that, and that really changed my whole way of thinking about federal taxes. But I still pay them.
Yeah. So his was, he was going on and on about that in the interview that he did on the Rise relating to taxes, about the individuals not required to pay federal income taxes ever. But I think he never spelt that out, and he wanted that section removed so he would not get into trouble. And I think that's what we saw then right away when the rough cut was released of the Rise by Michael Pachesny. He released it without Sean Wright knowing, and that's when all hell broke loose on our pages when the threats came through, because that hit YouTube. That went live. That got out there. That was an hour and a half. That was or was that the 2 hour?
Yeah, I think it was about 2 hours.
It was an hour and 37-minute documentary that he released. Then, about a year later, they edited it and released it, and it was an hour and 30 minutes. There's 7 minutes or so, roughly, missing. And the only things missing from those versions are the Sean Wright interviews. He pulled all his interviews out on the one that was effectively released, and they did release it for free, effectively, ultimately, because of the pressure came down from groups like ours to say, if you're trying to make money on this, we've got you busted. And so they did have to release it then for free. But when Michael Pachesny released that rough cut version, it had Sean Wright's talk about taxes in that out there available to the public. And that's the time that he jumped on my page and requested admin access like he did Thomas Lapp's page. And the only things removed right away when Thomas Lapp gave him administrative rights, Sean Wright started deleting chunks and chunks of the research and things folks had put forward in this case on the very weekend that this all came out, the very next week, about why was David's Facebook page altered, why was David's Facebook page deleted, who made these edits and things like that. That's the stuff that we had screenshots of right away that showed someone else was out there doing things, contaminating the evidence within the first 4 or 5 days of this case. And then I never granted him administrative access rights, and I published that stuff on my page called the Justice for David Crowley and Family, and that's when the threats came against me directly. He did not want that stuff out there, and that's when Thomas Lapp called me and says he's going to come after you demanding admin rights, take over as the administrator of that page, delete everything, and you're never going to get it back. So he said that you have got to deny him any access to anything on that page because he's looking for ulterior motives, while at the same time he's telling the public that he's grieving the loss of his very best friend and he can't come to grips with doing anything else in life because he's so distraught. And the backside of things, he's making phone calls and instant messaging and sending texts to those people, threatening them. He told me, you better not show up to that memorial service or it'll be the last mistake you've ever made. And so this is really what set him off, was that rise. And I had planned on going to the memorial service for David. I didn't even know him or the family, but I was, made statements that I was going to go to that memorial service and attend and leave some flowers or, do something to show support. And that's when he said, you better not even think of going to that. We'll have people there that'll take care of you. And then afterwards is when he says, you better watch your back going forward if you print anything more about me on your Facebook page. So this is what got him heated. And so it's interesting that this is on this page 30 here of this notepad called Open the Rise most recent version. The only person I can think that would even have that or entertain the thought of writing something like that would be Sean Wright. And so maybe he injected himself into this crime scene much like Dan Crowley Jr. did with the writing. And we've got all these kind of small-time players here involved in this crime scene that are inserting themselves in, when if they didn't, more and more people would have believed David would have done this. I would have believed that myself. It's only reason I'm here is because of all the errors that the amateurs made in the killing. The abundance of errors they made. Very, very sloppy.
Excellent points. Sophia, anything else before we move on to the next paragraph here?
I'm just glad that Dan never gave control.
Me too.
Or any partial control.
I'm glad Thomas Lapp let Dan know, right?
Yeah, because that's totally not suspicious.
No, it's fine. It's all good.
It was the days later that we had all these rogue and troll accounts coming in and becoming members. And right after I'd request the membership to join the group, they'd say, "Hey, can I have rights to help moderate the page if you ever need help? I know it's so busy. You must need some help moderating. Can I be an editor? No. Can I be an administrator, person like that?" And it's like, "Oh, no, thanks. No, I'm good." But then that's when that Sam Wagner character came out and says, why have you not given Sean Wright admin rights to this page? He's a lifelong member of this gray state, sorry, the pun there, the gray state, and he's been put his heart and soul into this project. He's the key member that you should be doing your interviews with because he knows everything. And I said, he's the last person I'm giving rights to this. I'd rather give him the time to let him mourn the loss of his best friend, which I think he needs time to be doing. That set him off.
Yeah.
These were some angry group of hyenas, Stephen. In the very first week after this event went down and I created this page, it was 48 to 72 hours later and people came out of the woodwork. And I had a big old target on my back because they did not like what I was doing, where I was exploring, the questions that I was asking, and who I was pointing fingers to. And I was just making comments right at the beginning of. I remember you, Greg. I remember you remember this is saying I think the police should investigate this person, or consider this person a possible interest, a possible suspect, or add them to the pool of interested, suspects that were out there. And boy, people thought that I was pointing the finger at Dan Crowley Jr., that he did it himself. I said, no, I just think that he would be a suspect in my book, or a person of interest. And I think Sean Wright would be, and I think Danny August Mason should be. All these guys. I never once said I think they killed them. I just said that they should have been included into the pool of suspects by authorities, and then later, subsequently, ruled out. Once you interview these people and you get to know what their alibis were, you can exclude them and cross them off the list. That's the normal procedures of an investigation like this. You get your pool of potential persons of interests, and then after you talk about them, it elevates that person either up to a suspect or it negates them and rules them off the list, and then what you're left with is some suspects. Police, in this case, the Apple Valley, never came up with people of interest, persons of interest, or suspects at all. They didn't interview anybody.
Yeah, that's what caught me. That's what caught me, you guys, was that there's no interviews of anybody. There's no suspects, nothing named, not even a neighbor. I mean, not even a dog, anybody. And it's going to be closest to you, with Danny Mason or Sean Wright, or these guys here. And the deep state got to these guys. I mean, why not? They're not just going to go in there if they got access to the house and there's trusting and everything else in there, and then they're going to go and put this thing together and kill the family and botch up the crime scene. It was above Sean Wright and Danny Mason's pay grade, but they were involved.
Yep, and that's what we've been saying from the very beginning. They're involved in some way, shape, or form. I don't know how, but still they were involved. That's a slam dunk. Any armchair investigator at this point, 6 years later, can tell you that they were involved. Now, that's not me pointing the finger saying that they are the ones who killed and pulled off the murders of these people, although they very well could have. But you've got to put these people under a microscope of where they are, where they were, what were they doing, what's their alibi. And so, like with Sean Wright, when we saw that random tweet on Christmas Eve, when the guy hasn't tweeted all year on Twitter, there's a photo of a nice little Christmas tree and him saying, "Merry Christmas, everyone," at 7:00 p.m. on Christmas Eve. That, to me, is, why is he trying to place himself at home? Where was he really? Why did that tweet needed to take place? Why did he need to post and publish a photo image of a Christmas tree on Christmas Eve, when many have suspected that this family of the Crowleys in Apple Valley were killed on Christmas Eve? That means right there he would be a person of interest to me, that he had to go out of his way to set an alibi for that reason.
Sure. Oh, and sure. I'm working a homicide case right now with an elder abuse that led to a dog bite. The dog bite was set up with control of the granddaughter caregiver who had abused the old man. They tried to put him in the car with a known dangerous dog of 5 police reports and animal control reports, and it was covered up to do the same thing. They take the closest people to you, like the granddaughter, and if you look at investigation, always look at the wife, whatever kids. The Crowley family's sadly gone. Now you got to step. Who visited that house the most next? That's it.
Correct.
Yeah, the film crew visited the house, the screenwriters, what have you. Everybody attached to his, pet project, his pipe dream, what have you. He wanted, and they were all involved. Those are the people visiting the house. It's just like business partners.
Correct. And then you got to take the statements of those very same people to police. And I don't know if you've read this, Stephen, but when they interviewed Danny August Mason, he said that he had no connection or business relationship to David on the film. He was just merely an actor. And so that was a lie right there. He was a co-founder of this entire project and one of the lead management people from the business situation of this entire project for these 4 years, leading up to this.
Oh, yeah.
And so now
absolutely. I mean,
why are you lying to detectives then? That would be your next raising your antenna. So the question is, did the Apple Valley Police just not know, or did they focus it and shut this case closely very, very quickly, as David did it because they were instructed to from above? I mean, the very first public release that they gave was, David did this, and oh, by the way, the public is not in any danger. They had to spell that out, that the public, there's not a madman on the loose. They had to spell that out right away, that the public was not in any danger. And we got this whole thing solved and tied off with a nice little bow, and everything is done. And then they went back and did a 1-year investigation and kind of came to the conclusion with evidence that supported that theory. But at the whole time, what have we been left with in the last 6 years in Apple Valley, Minnesota? We have had the killers on the loose. That's the whole point of your job in police, is to have protect and safety of the people. We've got killer or killers on the loose to this day, and now we're 6 years later. That's the point that we're trying to make here with this, the book and the justice page and everything else. Now, we know David didn't do it. The problem is the killers out there that did it are running around free. That's the biggest takeaway that most of our members on the justice page are frustrated with, is the fact that these lunatics, and I'll call them lunatics, are out there.
If you look at the IMDb, which I do television stuff on the side, is an internet movie database with David's film, The Gray State. If you look at the second person listed as a cast, it's Danny Mason, and then the fourth one is Sean Wright. I mean, these guys are so involved; it's unbelievable.
Yeah, they spent a lot of time on that project, and in the case of Sean Wright, was looking ultimately for his big payday, whether it was the movie, the web-based TV series, the Netflix series, the made-for-TV, or the documentary. He needed to have a payday, and none of that was coming. None of it. The only thing he had left was a documentary. And once David says, "I'm going to do that for free as well," I think that's when Sean Wright hit the roof with his anger and frustration, because he's like, "This is not going to fly." He just realized that he just got used for 4 years and got tossed aside like a piece of meat, and he wasn't going to have any of that. And so retribution is a bitch, and I think that's what his mindset was at the time. This family will pay, and pay dearly, so this can all fall into my lap. And of course, the whole script and everything fell into Danny Crowley Jr.'s and his father's lap, and handed over to Danny August Mason to proceed with it. And that's when they started creating the new company, incorporated a new company in the state of Minnesota with the Secretary of State, and started moving forward with the new screenplay. So it's all very obvious now, 6 years later, that we know what's all going on. But back then it was they thought they had everyone out snookered, is what I think. And we were just these pesky folks on the side getting in their way. So that's unfortunate. Greg, should I continue on page 61 then?
Yes, unless anybody else has anything else, I will, let's see, keep going here. I'm going to get to, the ESDA, because this was another thing here that kind of, I was like, okay, well, what is a ESDA? A ESDA works by applying an electrostatic charge to a document containing suspect indented writing. The indented writing is visualized through the application of charge-sensitive toner. Indented writing created from previously written documents on overlying pages can then be seen. In some cases, this method can be applied to develop fingerprints on documents. So if anyone was like me, had no idea what this ESDA was, I was looking around for it. You only see this on 2 pages. So because it's only on 2 pages, as Dan is going to read here, it just made me think, okay, did they look at every page and then they only found ESDA on these 2 pages? Or did they clearly see that there was some indented writing on these blank pages and then did this electrostatic detection on it? So I'm not sure.
I'll read it here, and maybe hopefully maybe Stephen will be able to expand a little bit more on this. But let me read this first paragraph. It says, page 61, separately, quote, 2 ESDA, electrostatic detection apparatus, lifts taken of impressions found on the front side of page 20 of the spiral notepad, end quote, were examined and labeled as item 41A-20A. Item 41A-21A consisted of, quote, 2 ESDA lifts taken of impressions found on the front side of page 21 of the spiral notepad, end quote. Should I continue on with the next section, or do you guys want to discuss that?
Well, you know what? The indented writing is a very accurate way to analyze handwriting, so it's accurate as you're saying it.
And that's like more of the pressure when you write with a ballpoint pen, for instance, how much pressure is in causing it to indent versus if you're just, you know. About that.
Yeah, you run a pencil across it lightly, and then sometimes an eraser, and you can pretty much read it.
Continuing on, it says, can we safely assume pages 20 and 21 were the only notepad pages with indented impressions? And that's a very good question. So, Greg, like you said earlier, we got an 80-page notebook here. Mm-hmm. It's only 59 pages left in it. The others were torn out, and they picked 2 pages with indented writing. So the question is, and maybe Stephen can answer this, is did they just pick those 2 pages because it was the easiest to do, or did they do them all and these were the only 2 that had it, or did they just pick these 2 out of the interest of time, the 2 most obvious ones? Let's get those done first, and then maybe do some additional ones. So how does that typically work?
You know what? I've done this a couple of times on cases, and you usually get to about maybe the second and third page, maybe, but for sure the backup page where the ESDA transfers from pressure. I can't answer your question on that one. I mean, you know, as a former cop and stuff, I mean, you know what? Like a lot of guys used to say, you got to be a little bit lazy, but sometimes it really does go against you. And I don't think they spent the time. They probably could have done better with that.
Yeah, and so if you have it just with these 2 pages here, and we're looking at pages 20 and 21, and like Dan said, we only got 59 pages, but actually they only got 59. There were only 59 pages in the notebook. We only got about 28 pages. So that was the other question. It kind of skips for, I think the lot we get, you know, it goes page 1, 2, 3, 4. It skips around. And the last one is labeled page 59. So the fact of where page 20 and page 21 are very relevant, and the image that we're looking at here now is what they found from both of those pages. So this is from page 20 and 21 when they were able to do the examinations. This is what they found here. And so this made me think that, again, this part, I think, is part of David's part of his fictional script. That's what I was thinking. He's taking notes. He's, you know, kind of writing down what happens with this as the script is going, kind of what happens inside of that script. So the actual pages, I think maybe page 19, you know, is in page, I don't know, unless there's, see, the problem is there could be pages mixed in between 20 and 21. We just don't know. We can only go by what they label the pages as and the pages that we have gotten. I believe we only got about 28 pages. So should we think that the other pages of the 59 that we didn't get, are those all blank? And you know, that's those are some of the questions that I would ask. But if you read some of this stuff, I don't know, you know, is this all supposed to make him seem crazy too? Is this all tied into David being a conspiracy theorist? If you've listened to David, if you've ever, you know, listened to any of his speeches or any of his speakings, does he sound crazy? Not to me. But let's read some of this. Typical Cal Army strength, weakness, deploy into a trap. This is kind of how David, I don't want to spoil the script for people who haven't read David's script dated May 12, 2014, but this could be a synopsis for that script here. Real militia shown before joined, ass, no one in or out of the city. This is definitely, you know, when I read David's script, that's pretty much how it starts out. It starts out in a foreign country and things happen there, and then the main character, who is not Danny Mason's character. It's a totally different name. So by this point, by May 12th, 2014, Danny Mason's character has been written out of the script. It's not in the script. This is way before David's script is turned into a TV series. And Danny Mason knows this. He has to know this at some point, at some level. He has to know he's basically being written out of something that he was part of since 2010. And people might disagree with me on this, but something that, according to what David Crowley said, this all pretty much started with Danny Mason. So for Danny Mason to say that he is not involved in anything more than just a character in this story is totally crazy. That's just totally wrong. So there's definitely more. No one in or out of the city. A lot of people can relate to that right now. Peace, bro. I don't know what that is. Language barrier in every way. Put your hope in something. Mode. Trying to escape. Lose a battle. So I think at this point, I really don't want to spoil the script too much, but there is a false flag going on in here where a person is falsely accused of a crime. And if you look at what happened with David Crowley, that's exactly what happened in real life. He was falsely accused of a crime. Unlike the fictional story where the main character of that fictional story, which I do believe is named Daniel, unlike that one, in this one here, David never gets a chance to correct that. So calls an all-American, something about messages, shooting, undercover, great danger, riots. I mean, these are all things that it's just, when you look at it now, it's pretty interesting to just compare the parallels to the fiction and then to the facts of this case as we know them. Going to full auto, walk into a gruesome situation, things come, unexpected, civilian encounters, escort friendly. That's what they were able to find from these ESDAs. Any thoughts on any of this writing or anything here?
Is it possible that those pages actually weren't in the notebook by the time the police had it, and just the indentation was still there?
Yes,
left over?
that could be. Absolutely.
Is there anything here that makes anyone think that this might have been part of David's script or part of something else, just casual notes, unrelated to anything?
A lot of the notebook is just casual notes that he's jotting down, lists, that kind of thing. But it does remind me of the script. Which version, I don't know, but it reminds me of the script.
Have you read the whole script?
Yeah, I read both of them.
Yeah, there are a couple things in here that are very, very similar to that. Except for the undercover thing, I don't know if I remember where that came from.
From an undercover dangerous riot. Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Huh. Sounds kind of familiar.
I think if there's anything else for this page, I think that's probably all for this one.
Yeah, I agree with Sophia. Probably just script notes related.
Let's see. If not,
All right, this is.
go ahead.
Should I go at the final paragraph here,
yeah, go
Greg?
ahead.
It says handwriting comparisons between what was written on the notepad and the writings on the refrigerator door and checkbook in the kitchen never happened. Period. 3 pages labeled as 41A/39, 41A/40, and 41A/41 were, quote, warped from being wet from something, end quote.
Yeah, and I've got those pulled up here. This is from the BCA 488. There are 2 big BCA documents. There's a 485, and then there's the 488. So on the 488 one, page 232, this kind of stuck out because it was kind of, I was wondering, okay, how do they get warped? It says just they're warped from being wet from something. If you go back to the crime scene photo where these items are, you can kind of see there's a paper towel there, right? There's a roll of paper towels there. A notepad getting wet, it's not easy to really get something wet. Generally you would kind of know, right? You know if it's water or if it's coffee. In my case, if it's maybe wine or something like that, you could pretty much tell. So I just was kind of wondering, that was just one weird thing that just kind of stuck out, and I had contemplated maybe taking that part out, but I thought that it was relevant, and maybe somebody can kind of help us, how do these pages get warped? How do they get wet? More so, I'm going to pull those pages up, at least 2 of them, because we only have 2. We don't have page 41. If you look at here at the bottom, 3 pages of the notepad were wet, pages 39, 40, and 41. Well, here's page 39 on the left-hand side, the front of 39. Then there's 39B, which means the back of 39. And then we have page 40. So, because we don't have the actual color photos of these pages, it's hard to tell how warped it is. But just looking at, obviously, these black and white images, they don't look very, very warped. The one on the left-hand side might be more tied to David, possibly, little drawings, doodles of a person's head. But then pages, the back of 39 and then the front of 40 looks more like his wife's writing. She's writing things for her. She had a business, right? She had a, help me out here. I want to say a baking business, but she had
like a cupcake business kind of a thing.
Yeah, something like that. Which was really good. I've seen some of the cakes and some of the baking things that she did, and it was really good. And you can see some of the recipes here. So again, these are pages after what David wrote. There's no blood on these pages. So again, it's looking at the whole document, which pages do have blood, which pages don't. David's stuff is right in the middle of this notepad, and it just, I don't know, it just seemed very out of place. But I wondered why these 3 pages were warped. What could have warped them? How long would they have been warped for? I've always looked for different clues if somebody was forcing David to write anything in this book. Just anything like that, any type of sign, any type of hint to help us understand what was going on in that house when these messages on this notepad were being written, when there's blood on the front cover, on the back cover, just on certain pages. Where those indented writings are, there's no blood, right? There's literally only blood on certain pages, which I think I do have. I think that's what we do have here, where you can see where the blood is. Page 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, and then on the back side of page 58. It's just kind of odd where this is. It's, how does blood get on all of these different pages? You have to be flipping through this notepad to get to a certain page. Maybe they were flipping to get to page 30 where David had wrote those two messages, and they wanted to try to tie the blood to that and make sure that they put his blood on there. If it was the right hand that was found, if it was the latent print of David's right hand that was found in this notepad, I might think that maybe somebody, took his hand, his severed hand, or his right hand that is missing, and just added blood to it and just plopped it down there. But this is his left hand, which is still there. It still looks like it's in pretty good shape even when it's found. So that to me also didn't make sense. But it's these 3 pages that were kind of warped from something that just, I don't know, it just rubs me the right way. How do only 3 of these pages get warped from something wet? I don't know. More questions, unfortunately.
There's nothing saying that the notebook was written in, the blood got there and stuff like that while he was in the office. It could have been brought to him, or it could have been in a living room and then placed there, because we don't see blood other than the notebook and the pen.
Right.
It's not anywhere else in the office. So it could have been placed there after the fact.
Right, but if they're able to tie it to his left hand, then that means his left hand at least had to physically be on this notepad at some point. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know. There's no other blood there. I mean, it just seems a long place to go to write something, to get the blood there. It doesn't make sense to me. We have 3 different crime scenes. It's kind of what it seems like, You have 3 different crime scene writings at the very least. But why not just put the notepad in the living room, next to the bodies, next to everything? I don't know. There's something missing that I'm not seeing here. Go ahead.
I don't know. They could have brought it to him. He wrote on it while he was in the living room or kitchen area. They took it back. They were looking at something either on the computer or in his office for something. And that's where it was left. I mean, there's so many inconsistencies with this case anyway.
I know. And the big roll of paper towels that is right there too. Anything could have been wiped up. There could have been more blood in that office room that was wiped up. I don't know. It's just weird.
Well, it's not in the trash. It's not in the inside trash. It's not outside because somebody took the trash down to the curb to be emptied. So I guess, unfortunately, we won't know the answer to that.
No. And then I would also, lastly, here, unless anybody has anything else on anything that we've covered so far, looking at pages 53 to 58 of the BCA 488, you'll get a lot of good information about the back and forth that the BCA and the investigators were all covering. As far as what they were going to do. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that I was just looking through this like, wow, I could have included a lot more stuff in this book, maybe just covering some of this, some of these things that they were going back and forth with. So I don't know. Let's see if I can go there or not. But yeah, if you just look at some of these pages here of what they were doing, you can get a clear understanding of the date. I mean, every time that we talk about how quickly people were saying that David Crowley was guilty, like, they hadn't gotten anything back yet. They didn't have DNA. They didn't have the latent prints. They didn't have the firearms, yet they were all telling us that they had it all. Why would they do that? Why would the Gray State team do that? If they really cared about David Crowley, if they really cared about truth, if they were really fighting a quote-unquote gray state, their actions do not show that. Their actions show something totally different, something scripted that we see with a lot of other cases. That is not a good thing, is not a positive thing, is not a very helpful thing. It's all just to get people to stay silent, to misdirect people, or just to make people think, hey, just like how we were talking about earlier, why don't you have Sean Wright? Why isn't Sean Wright here? He's a credible source. Didn't take very long to figure out that's not true. And I think I think a lot of people see that, but just if you go through pages 53 through 58, you get a clear understanding of this back and forth, of what they were looking at, what they wanted, what they didn't want. We have a couple people in the chat room. I want to say hi to everybody that's in the live chat room too. One of the people, Johanna, I believe, was saying that Dan Crowley Jr. is left-handed. I don't know. I don't know if we've ever talked about that or not, but that's probably in regards.
Yes, he is. I've done an episode on that. This is Dan. Dan Crowley Jr. is left-handed. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
correct.
And then George Cleese is also in the chat. Thoughts on the We Are Change organization that Sean Wright was part of? I've heard suspicions that it was some kind of a spook disinfo group. Played a role in getting former 911 filmmaker Jonathan Eilenhoff to bust a Colorado sheriff, Pat Sullivan, in conjunction with federal agents. That's interesting. In Colorado, that would not surprise me. I've heard similar things about We Are Change just being a place where they can gather intel on real people, on people that actually care about this country, that care about where this country is going, that care about cases like this one, that care about our soldiers. That we have a clear case right here, a slam dunk case of a soldier who is being accused of one of the highest crimes here, killing his family, killing his daughter, and killing himself. And it's this. So the whole We Are Change thing. One of the reasons why I left We Are Change was because that's how I started feeling. It was just a big gatekeeper thing. I met a lot of great people there, but there were a lot of people trying to run We Are Change, trying to control where We Are Change went, and I really feel like they were trying to lead us down a rabbit hole, a bad rabbit hole. They wanted to lead us directly into something that would get us in trouble with law enforcement, similar to what we've seen recently here in the USA.
Oh, and say a shout out to George Cleese. He runs and operates CavDef.
What's that now?
CavDef. It's let me look up what's the acronym mean exactly. 'Cause I always go by CavDef. Coalition Against Voter Disenfranchisement.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
he follows our kind of cases, Yosemite case, and he's on my Facebook. But he hit me up today for the podcast, so he's on.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hey, George.
Well, hey George, keep
Yeah,
up
he's a great guy.
the great work, man. I'll try to try to follow you more on that, because I've just started paying
definitely.
attention to that stuff. Yeah, Coalition Against Voter Disenfranchisement and Election Fraud.
Yeah.
Started out on the election integrity, but now documents many other conspiracies. Interesting. Okay, well, welcome.
Yeah, no, he's one of our guys. Yeah, he definitely is a good friend.
That's great. And that's what's so great. There's so many great people out there that are looking at this case, that are And it's just all about making sure that they have access to these documents, they have access to anything that might help them to research and to come to their own conclusion. We're not here to try to tell you what you should think about this case. I think it's pretty clear. And what I find is, even recently, I'm not going to name names, but even recently, I've come across people that were looking at other things and finally realized that, there are people out there that are purposely trying to mislead you, that are purposely trying to trick you, that are purposely trying to take you to not let you focus on what the facts of this case are. They don't want you to focus on that. Because if they did, you'd be right here with us, and they don't want that. We've seen that from the very start. The people that wanted admin rights, they don't care about facts. They don't care about the facts of this case. They don't want you to look at that because they know what will happen. You start looking at the facts, and you will come to a factual, logical conclusion about this case pretty easily. Honeypot trap for truthers is what Johanna says. Yeah, interesting. That's what We Are Change was. I felt like a lot of the groups in 2012. That's what they were. I felt like God had kind of kept me away from a lot of that stuff, because as soon as I joined We Are Change, it pretty much kind of split up, and it was just these little different factions. And you still had some people who would show up talking about bombing government, talking about doing violence. And, we never want to do that. I don't want to be a part of any violent group. I'm not for violence. I am a Christian. I'm with Jesus Christ. That's where I go. That's where I start. That's where I end. So when somebody comes into one of our groups, starts talking about committing violence, it raises a lot of red flags. And that's what happened with the whole We Are Change thing, is we started seeing a lot of that. And then all of a sudden, it's just gone.
That's the undercover Fed boys trying to entrap people.
Yeah. Yep. Thankfully, it didn't work as far as I know. As far as I know, but even at the Bohemian Grove in 2012, there were people there who wanted to storm the gates, and they wanted to. Of course, they weren't going to do it themselves. They were trying to incite other people to. But it's that's not going to help. That's not going to do anything. That's just, it's not going to help your cause, as far as I see it. Anyways, way off topic there, but the honeypot theory is pretty interesting. So any other thoughts on this, guys? That's pretty much. I mean, we're at the end here of page 62 of the office bedroom. I think we've completed our mission here as far as this month with this show, and I just hope people will know that you have access to all of these documents, everything that we're talking about, everything that's in this book. It's all documented. You'll be able to tell what is clear, what is fact, what we're just thinking might be fact, what we think might be our own theories, or what is possible, or just things that we should actually look at, things that we should take seriously here. So
I don't have anything else to add. It was a good episode. It was nice to have Stephen join us too.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it. I researched some of the blood transfers and things like that. We probably all looked at ourselves on the internet, but just to go back to one of the photographs in the hallway, the height of it and everything else. And usually when it's pressed like that, and that blood splatter, and it was tough to find anything close to that. It looks like that blood. Splatter. That blood transfer on the hallway wall was placed there. Okay. It wasn't, everything else is smeared and everything else. And I like going back to Dan's theory, which every time we speak about this case, there's something new. It's like an onion that peels.
Yeah.
Is that when you write in capitals and lowercase, what have you? I mean, and especially in a situation like that where there's adrenaline going, we all don't talk about how nervous these guys are in there. And this isn't Sunday brunch. They want in and out and whatever. They're going to do what they do by habit. And when we got Allah is great, on the wall in capitals, that totally tells me we know for a fact that there's more than one player, whether it's deep state or not. It's related to who was closest to David. And I'll come out and say it in my own self-risk that this Sean Wright and Danny Mason are dirty on this.
Have you actually dug into any of their backgrounds?
I have. I see that. I sent an email to Greg and Dan. I pulled up some YouTube videos of Danny August Mason, and this guy is a cowboy.
You need to dig into Sean Wright if you haven't.
Yeah, I started looking into that. He looks like he's done some fairly potent interviews, Sophia.
Well, it's not just the interviews. His criminal history is what you need to look at the most.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. If you have anything, email it to me.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely do that.
Yeah, I'd love to see anything you have.
He's assault and battery numerous times, breaking and entering, things along those lines. Trying to remember.
Yeah,
off the top of my head.
Yeah, credibility is one thing, but and you look at what they're trying to do with David's project, currently, and who was involved back then. And I've had 2 television projects knocked off. One from a reputable network, and the other one years later from my talent. It was on the sizzle reel, and Discovery launched it for one episode. But when imitation is the greatest form of flattery is fine for the first time. Second time, write me a check. And this was David's project, and these guys they're just vultures, and they're shadowed this thing, and he's gone, and you don't see anything that's any kind of condolences. It's just like it was business as usual, and these guys took control.
Well, like with Danny August Mason, he already had a new film company, created it in his head, basically, and was talking about it, I believe, 72 hours after their bodies were found. And
Hothead Productions?
No, that was David's. It was Gray State Universe.
Oh, okay.
So he just took David's idea and just added a different word at the end. And Dan found that he even created a LLC or something like that in regards to it, got a business license, and is trying to get the script. He was trying to do this, continue it after the death. And then you have Sean, who was doing the documentary after their death. I mean, like immediately. They didn't skip a beat. Excuse me.
Yeah, Sophia, you're right. Because 4 months later, he had already had an attorney retained to go through the trademark process of getting it copyright and trademark of the Gray State name, logo, and the brand. And so that was sometime in May of 2015. But yeah, earlier on, he had already created the company and filled out the forms of incorporation with the Secretary of State of Minnesota to create a company called Gray State Universe LLC. And this was still, I think, at the point where they thought that script landed in their hands, they could just simply move forward with it. But it was investigators within the Justice page on Facebook that said, that is a, what is the term on that registration period? That was for how many years? That the written script was David's. He had a frame on his wall in his office that showed that he owned that registration through the year 2018 or 2019. And so then I think that's when he abandoned it, when he realized that he couldn't do anything with it until that expired from David's copyright. Was that something with the Screen Actors Guild?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, there was the the Screen Actors Guild.
It's it's Writers Guild of America East. We got West out here. It's East.
Okay.
You always do WGA first, and it's actually copywritten as soon as you type your first letter on any kind of database type computer. So it's copywritten and everything else, and you don't give it up. And in 75 years plus the person's death, that like the Warren Report with Kennedy, 75 years after his death, that it becomes public record. 1923 copyright law, and it's pretty much cut and dry. So the IP on this thing, intellectual property, is probably totally being violated. Just nobody's calling them on it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think recently they just abandoned the whole project. So, but they didn't think all this through beforehand. I think is what the comedy side of it is, that they had moved along and created the company, started with the trademarking and copywriting and moving forward with it, but not actually knowing what they were doing. So it all came.
But
back
you know what?
Anyway.
Well, you know, I say we look into it. Maybe we pick up the copyright for the right reason, or see we can do something with it, and take the project forward. Why not? We're already in it.
Well, I mean,
why not get it? I mean, get it out of the hands of these scoundrels.
Yeah.
Well, the dad and Danny August Mason have claims against it already.
Do they?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. You know what? You might go to maybe his father, or maybe some other family members that precede him going ahead and claiming that.
It just seems like if they really wanted to move forward with the project, don't they understand they need to help us clear David's name first? Nobody's going to touch a project that is tied with a alleged child killer and a soldier that committed suicide. I mean, it just seems like it's kind of like they want the project dead. They want it in their hands, so nobody gets it. Yeah.
Well, here's what we do. We create a documentary around that documentary, and then we take what's in that documentary and we plug it in there, plagiarize or not, let them sue us. But we do something in the respect of David and his family for his project, and we produce the whole thing in there with all these players and stuff, and you still that's just an idea, but let's go around it and then bring it in.
Yeah, you pretty much would.
It's an idea.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. It's a story about what happened with David.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I we between all of us, we'll talk off what we're doing now, but we definitely have the people out here and everything. We definitely do something like that. Greg, look what you did with Philip Marshall was fantastic with a cell camera.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I wish I would have done better or done different or different.
It was pretty good though. I mean, it's good. It can be it could be amateurish. It still tells a story. Maybe that's what we look at is we just do our own gig. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks again for everything, guys. I got to jump off. Thanks again for your comments, Stephen. And
Dan, I'll talk to you later, man.
All right, sounds good. See you, Sophia. See you, Greg.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye, Dan.
All right, see ya.
There goes Dan. Yep.
He's an eligible guy.
Yeah, very, very centered. Very centered guy. Yeah.
Hey, so when we go off air, let's talk, okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so I want to thank everybody in our chat room. Thank you all for joining me here on this channel. I really think as we keep going here, we're going to move a lot of our live feeds here to this channel. So try to make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, because I think we're going to move all of our David Crowley stuff here just in case something happens with my other channel. But next month we're going to talk about the master bedroom. Stephen, you're always welcome if you want to come back and join us. I'd like to get Stephanie back on too. Stephanie was a big part of some of our first shows. And I think just talking about the podcast, now that we've done 13 shows, this will be our 13th show here. I feel like, when I watch the first 5 or 6 shows, when I listen to them, I can see, and really when I started this podcast, when we started this, I had no idea what we were going to do, the structure, the format, and I think within the last maybe 4 or 5 shows, I think we found kind of our format. I really like just reading through this book, stopping, talking about different things. The master bedroom is literally 2 pages, so it could be a very short show. So that's why it's always great to have people in our chat room, to kind of, if you bring up anything, we would love to make sure that we include this into this podcast. The goal here is still the same, to get justice for this family, and I think that as long as we keep talking about it, we have achieved that goal. It's when we go dark, then we fail. It's when we go silent, then we fail. And silence doesn't always mean that you're just not talking about this. We have many people helping us behind the scenes. We have many people out there right now praying for us. Many people out there who are just kind of learning about this, trying to get caught up on it, and there is a lot to get caught up on. So I try not to get frustrated with people when they ask questions that I've heard 30,000 times. That's fine. Whether you like my answer or whether you don't, that's your choice. But if you ask me a direct question, I will do my best to let you know what I think. And I hope that everybody will too. We all have different views on different things, and I think when we come here, when we talk about this case, it's very important to listen to what other people say, even if we've heard it from other people in the past. There are many people joining the group still. We still get a lot of new people there. I would say especially in the last year, 2 years, and recently in this last month, to be honest, there's been a lot of people looking at the world, looking at our country right now, and saying this is what David was talking about. So next month we will come back here. There will always be a new podcast on the 1st of every month, and next month we're going to come back and talk about the master bedroom. Like I said, it's only 2 pages, so if you have anything, if anyone listening, watching this has anything that you want to make sure that we cover that is tied into the master bedroom, maybe something I didn't put into this book. On the physical book, this will be pages 65 and 66. That's pretty much about it. There's not a lot to really cover there. We have now covered, ending with the office bedroom, we have now covered pretty much all of the rooms that have blood in them, all the ones that are tied to this crime scene, to the actual case. We've covered everything that is related to any writing, any accusations against David. We've pretty much covered that, and as you've all seen, there's nothing here that really ties David to this crime. You have a left middle finger that ties David to this crime. That's it. So God bless you all, and I'm gonna go ahead and shut this down, and I hope everyone listening to this, watching this, will join us next month, and I will say until then, Murder at 1051 Ramsdale Drive. What happened to David Crowley, his wife, and his daughter? If this was truly a double murder-suicide, why did investigators fail to prove David Crowley guilty? Where is the evidence David Crowley killed his wife and daughter? Where is the evidence David Crowley killed himself? Within 24 hours of finding the bodies of David, Kamel, and Rania Crowley, the Apple Valley Police Department were treating the incident as a double murder-suicide. Authorities cannot prove David wrote Allahu Akbar in his wife's blood on the living room wall. Authorities cannot prove David wrote I have loved you all with all of my heart on a laptop in the kitchen. Authorities cannot prove David wrote Open the Rise most recent version, Submit to Allah Now on a notepad in his office bedroom. Authorities cannot prove the dog trapped inside the house ate David's right hand, both of Kamel's hands, and their daughter's right arm, since dog feces tests were never done. Authorities did not know about a bullet that rolled out of a living room carpet until they were notified by the cleaning company 2 days after the bodies were found. That bullet would later be tied to Rania Crowley. Authorities did not see the bullet hole in the living room ceiling or the bullet in the attic above until they questioned David's friend a month after the bodies were found. Authorities did not find a motive to support their accusations against David Crowley. Authorities did not find David's blood on any of the bullets at the crime scene. Authorities do not know when David Kamel and Rania Crowley died. What we know for sure is that David Crowley has not been proven guilty.
Welcome to the Gray Stage podcast number 14. Today we're going to cover chapter 8, which is pages 65 and 66 in the book. And the book is called The Gray Stage, authored by Greg Fernandez Jr. And once again, this is the March 1st episode number 14 for Gray Stage. My name is Dan Hennon. We're also joined today with Sophia, Stephen Sanzeri, and William Rail. Good, we got a good episode for today, and once again, those following along in the book, it's pages 65 and 66, a short chapter. It's chapter 8, and it's really these 2 pages is going to be more than enough for this podcast. There's a lot in this chapter, a lot of information. The agenda for today's podcast will be starting off with the gun safe, then moving on to the drug deal, the bathroom, and then other items. And we've got a load of information here, so this is looking forward to this episode. A lot to cover here with the Crowley case. And all these things here, we're going to be talking about the master bedroom. And so we got the gun safe. It's not one of those big, large weapons safes, but it's just a tabletop one here. And for those watching here on the viewing, the images will be up here. I'll start reading here with this chapter. There were no immediate signs of any blood inside the master bedroom area, according to Detective Tommy Booth. The gun safe in the bedroom was open. Inside the safe was a loaded magazine with .40 caliber hollow point ammunition. The push keys on the gun safe were swabbed and labeled as item 38. Blood was not found on the push keys, but DNA results showed a mixture of 2 or more individuals. The major DNA profile belonged to a female, matching Kamel. Even so, David and Rania could not be excluded as possible contributors to the mixture. Who wants to start off here? William, maybe talk a little bit about this gun safe from what you're familiar with, and maybe move on to Stephen next.
Sure. So I actually got the exact model and everything. The actual buttons themselves on this model here, or on this exact one, they look like they're a little bluish. I mean, we've seen it a little differently. But I did find the model. It is a GV2000S. Get the exact thing. It's a gun vault, multi-vault handgun safe. And of course, lock type. It's a key lock. But the thing is, I was very curious about on this is I didn't see any information about how it was opened. I feel that's kind of going to play somewhat of a role in this because, well, if it was open with the keys, then it would be somebody that knows the combination, and if it was open with the actual key itself, then anybody could have done it. And I didn't see any information on that.
And another question. This is Dan from the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group. One of the questions that did come up, and hopefully you both gentlemen could answer this, is the confusion on this image here on the left is 2 points. One is it one where you place your hand on there and the sensors sense who's doing it and automatically opens, or are those buttons that you press in a certain sequence that activate the safe to open? And the final question, is that a left or a right-handed? Does your hand have to be on there on your left hand, or is it your right hand? Or if it's just push buttons, why does it appear that it looks like fingers, like a hand has to be laid up there for sensors? Those are the most common questions that come up on this. Can you relay some of that information back, either of you?
So, I mean, that's the thing. It's like when I'm looking at this, I mean, going off the information it's got on here, it's programmable access code. So I'm not really sure if it's sensors. It looked more like push buttons to me. Okay. So it would be like the actual, like, you'd actually have to push in the key code basically, and then it would open. Okay. Or at least unlock, and you could just basically just pull it out. But I didn't see anything about it actually being like electronic in that sense. But it does have an actual like electronic port you can see there too. So that's what I'm kind of curious about myself.
And like you said, if someone had the key, it would be irrelevant who gained access. It would just be the person who had the key.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
And the really weird thing about this is we see the keys in the right photo. We can see the keys clearly right there. So that's why I'm curious if basically, I feel like the police should kind of clarify this. Like, did they, check to see if it was open with the key lock or if it was open with just the buttons? If there's any way to even do that, really. I just found that really interesting because we don't know how it was opened. And I feel that's really relevant to the case because if it was open with key, anybody could have gotten in. And if it was just push the keys that are photographed inside, are you saying that those are the keys that would have potentially opened up this safe? They would have had been in there, or those just backup set of house and car keys in this safe? That was another question that came up several times. Well, the thing is, like, you can see if I'm trying to think what photos. Let me bring it up real quick. It's a DSC 0427 photo. If you look at that one, it does look like the actual key itself to open it is on there. And it does have gunvault.com, like its little keychain on there as well. So I'm assuming that was the actual one.
Stephen may be able to help also. How common would it be for just a person in a home to have a hollow point ammunition, 40 caliber hollow point? I've heard of, I'm not a gun person myself, but hollow points I think of with drug gangs or gangs on the streets and people trying to kill and execute folks because it blows off their head essentially with a hollow point. This would not be something you'd use just for home defense, would it not?
You know what? That hollow point's the only way to go. If you shoot like fully jacketed ball ammo, like 45s, you shoot at the range. They have a tendency to go through more. They don't mushroom and expand, and flesh or bone and what have you will stop that more frequently. So in hollow points for self and home defense, it's the only way to go. Chances are it's not going to go through somebody and go through the wall and such as much as a fully jacketed round.
Okay.
Yeah, I was about the gun safe, guys. That you got a choice in that gun safe. Is it just use the key, or it's not a biometric where your fingerprints idea. It's a push button thing. But when you buy a safe like that, you can open the key, and or you can also program that little four button digital opening. Okay. So you can do it
very similar to a safe you'd find in a hotel room. One of those.
Right, exactly.
Very similar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but biometric would be like fingerprint recognition.
Okay. That's what many of the questions we had on the Justice page early on when these photos first became available. Those of us not in the know looked at that. It looked like four fingers. You'd lay your hand right on top of there and it would open up. Only the right person would be able to open it because it looked like a biometric type of a thing. So we spent a lot of time answering questions like that when the members first joined the page. But really, it's just a series of push buttons is essentially a combination of push buttons.
Yeah, it's basically a keypad, yeah.
Okay.
That's what they call it.
Good to know.
And so the assumption here for the newer listeners out there is that David kept his gun, this XD handgun, in this safe, and then it was the one found on the living room floor. And so the assumption is the gun that was used for these killings essentially came from here. It goes on to say that there was no blood found on the push keys, which would make sense because you would assume that no blood had taken place until that gun case was open and the gun was taken out to perform the killing. So there's nothing surprising there as far as no blood found on these push button keys. Is that a safe assumption? That's not a surprising fact, right?
No, I mean, I'd say going off the narrative, that would be totally how I would see it as well. But I mean, those keys though, that's the thing. That's leading me to believe this is just kind of opened just to make it look like that's what happened.
Oh, correct. Yes, I agree too. I'm one of I think the very few people that believe that the weapon found at the scene that was laying there had nothing to do with the crimes at all. It was just laid there. And so, yes, if they went back to open this to lead down the police down that narrative, they had to first open up this key, this safe, to lead you to the illusion that this gun was tied to the safe, therefore it was David's, therefore David did it, yada, yada, yada.
But he also had guns elsewhere in the house. I mean, he had the ones I think it was in his trunk. He had the ones downstairs. I don't know if those were all props or not, but I know he had multiple guns. So, I mean, who's to say? But not to mention, if you were to look at the damage from a hollow point, I mean, I've been going over this for quite a bit of time on this one, it doesn't add up. He'd have to get shot multiple times in the head for it to kind of, do what it did. And then also the whole thing of paleo doing it, whereas, I mean, we can get into that. I mean, we can go and expand from there, but it just doesn't add up.
So the major DNA profile belonged to a female, so it would have been Comel's fingers doing the push button combination on this, which would, I guess, make sense as well.
Do we know if did David teach her to shoot?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, then she went and got certified as well through a course and a class from Eric Peckheiser. So, but David was the main one, showing her the ropes and getting. And she actually had her own weapon at one point.
Yep.
The DNA test that they used on the gun safe was a Loki DNA test type. A locus is a specific physical location of a gene or other DNA sequence on a chromosome, like a genetic street address. Mm-hmm. And this was the only item in the house that had the specific test.
So that is a bit odd. So
yeah, it is.
I mean, especially as there's other things they could have used that on as well. There was other options. I mean, I don't even know all the options off the top of my head, but there's plenty of other options they could have used for a lot of the swabbing and all this, and they didn't use those.
This is Dan. I have another last question on this. For the safe, it does appear like it's plugged in to a jack or a wall outlet, that black cord. What would that be for in this case? Is this electronic?
Yes. So basically, I mean, I just went over the specs again just to, refresh myself. So basically, this is there for, it's got a lockup mode apparently. So, and also it's using batteries for this. It's basically just for the lockup mode, is what it looks like. And it does have a battery warning. It has what else? I mean, it's got all sorts of different things. But it's essentially that way. It's basically you can just it'll lock if somebody tries it enough times, and they just keep failing. It'll just lock.
Yeah,
it.
Greg's got the manual pulled up here now on the screen that shows it runs on AC power with the battery backup. Okay, Interesting.
You should still be able to open it with a key, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
But the actual push key part won't.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it won't work because you got to have the electricity running for that.
Okay, and this is not like a bioscan or anything like that, where it's scanned to somebody's fingerprints or anything like that. So, so all that would to open this, all that somebody would need is just the combination or the actual key.
Exactly.
And we know that Kamel's DNA is on that. David's couldn't be excluded, but in the same case as Ranya's couldn't be either. The likelihood of Ranya, being the one to open it is very unlikely. So because of that, and the major profile being a female, it seems highly unlikely that maybe even David opened this.
Mm-hmm.
So well, my takeaway on this is that I still go back to them being held hostage. There was some time. She may have ran over there to pull a gun out and just didn't quite get to it or pull it out. And the freshest DNA is they're going to pick that up, of course. But there's no blood on those keys or anything. This is prior to her being attacked or touching her husband or her daughter with blood or anything else. So she may have tried to go get that gun.
Yeah.
Or if the murderers knew they needed to murder the family and make it, have David be the culprit, they needed to get in, so they could have ordered her to open it, or ordered him to open it, or got the combination and opened it themselves and obviously wiped it down afterwards, or was wearing a glove at the time because no one else's fingerprints are on there. But police go out of their way to say that there's DNA on the push button to gain access to that code. Did they ever test the actual key itself to see who used that key to open it?
Just nobody did. There was no
one could
at all.
To me, that would be your thing you'd want to be looking at from a detective, is not only the push button access combination, but the key to gain access to the safe. If the killers had the key and just simply open it up, obviously they'd be wearing gloves or they would have wiped it down anyway, but was any research done as to the fingerprints or any kind of latent prints on those keys? That's where your investigation needs to take that next level, which we know that the Apple Valley group here did not take that extra level in any one of these scenarios. So
they got awarded them, man. They got awarded them, remember? Great job, guys.
Great job.
Well, they don't even mention if they found these keys either, right? So that's not mentioned. Here's an image of the actual keys that should be somewhere. So it would be curious to see, because we know there's several sets of keys throughout that house, and I wonder if these were part of any of the keys that were found in that house.
You can see it on the photo I was telling you about earlier. Okay. The ones that are inside the gun vault, you can actually see it. Yeah, it is directly right there.
Oh, really? So the keys inside the gun vault is what you're saying?
Yep.
Sorry.
And it says right there in the instruction manual, never put those keys in because of the risk of locking them in. And there they are, nicely portrayed here on the upper shelf of the safe. So clearly this is a staged thing. Is it not?
Oh, they even moved them around too.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, a lot of moving around.
And that's just a removable shelf in there, is it not?
Yes.
Okay.
You don't even see their little gun vault logo or anything. They don't even have the keychain in there. Doesn't look like. They got it. It's on the DSC 0427.
So David, he's very vigilant, and being in the service, and maybe things he was sensing. He would do the combination on the four keys, and wouldn't have his key in there, obviously, not, and it's a lot faster than that if you lose the key. So my guess is that he already had a program just, for the programming on the push buttons, and I think that's how it works. We want to get to the weapon fast.
And then he would have shared that combination with Kamel, or would there be two combinations, one for the husband, one for the wife?
No, I believe there's just one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it'd be one. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're moving the keys again.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. But yeah, you're right. There it is, right there. You can clearly see that it's in. What the hell? Why would you put it inside?
Yeah.
Even got the logo, the keychain.
Yeah. Just really trying to go on. Hey, this is what happened here.
It did come with two keys. I can't. No, I think that's the second one in the back right there too. I think they're both on there.
I mean, I've had gun safes, guys, and you know, they have a key and then they have a 4-digit dial. I never ever put the key inside my gun safe. There's no way.
Yeah. I mean, and if we can get a hold of like a picture of like maybe Kamel's keys, I would guess it's probably there with her.
Any input from you, Sophia, on this image?
Just that it was odd that it was left open like that, and that the keys are still in there. That, to me, this whole entire crime scene is staged. Everything about it.
Everything is.
Oh yeah. I think the only room that doesn't have any connection to the crime scene itself is Renia's, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked and I didn't see anything in there. I mean, kids leave their doors open. You know, I got 2 kids; they both do it. I mean, maybe not my daughter as much as her brother, but still, you know, for the most part, kids that's what they do. They leave their doors open. So I mean, I feel like that part is not even staged. I feel like that's just you know, kids being kids.
What about the kitchen counter? Was there anything where it looked like David had emptied his pocket?
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff there. I don't know if there was a key set part of that. Yeah, there is actually.
Looks like it, yeah.
DSC 0044. Can't tell whose keys they are, obviously, but yes, there is a set of keys there, and I don't see anything that would match that key. These are car keys too.
Looks like a car in a house.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what that silver thing is. Maybe a flashlight or something, or like a tool, which would make me think is probably David's.
Yeah.
And of course, she probably has a purse, so.
That looks like a laser pointer, actually.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
That's pretty interesting. Cool.
I mean, they laid everything out in just a way that it's like, well, they got his bloody phone. I mean, it's all clearly like set up on purpose to make it look this way. So that way, it just kind of like what Dan was saying earlier, kind of just like the police kind of show up and just like, oh, it's already solved for us. Basically, we know who did this. You know, just kind of laying it out as much as possible. So that way, it's just kind of, you know, run in and then just run out. And they only took a day for it, which is odd anyways.
Right. How nice of them.
Right?
All laid out for you right here. No problem.
Lazy detective work.
Just stop asking questions and say that he's guilty.
Right? Totally a suicide.
Everything's been spoon-fed to you.
So we are going to have the manual out there if anybody wants to take a look at it. It's about 15, 16 pages. I'll make sure that I put that on my website. Maybe we can add that into our group files too, just so people can if they want to know exactly what this gun safe is, what it does, what it can't do, because there's been a lot of different theories and different thoughts about that gun safe, and I do hope this kind of clears up a lot of that stuff here. So.
Yeah, I'll even throw up on a Discord so that way
cool.
People want access to it there as well.
Excellent. Yes, you know, it's good to get this stuff and all these documents. Man, we need everybody. You know, anyone listening or watching this, please make sure that you feel free to take these documents, put them somewhere, because you just never know. You know, you never know. It's good to have all these documents in as many places as possible. So, you know, I want people to feel free to take these documents and to do whatever you want with them. Use them to call me crazy. If you want. Now, this is an interesting one. Unless anybody else has anything on the safe, I want to move on to the magazine that was in that safe. If this is the magazine that was in, I do believe this is the magazine that was in that safe, because that was another question too. If you look at it in these images here, it looks like it's black, but I think it's just a reflection off of that.
No, it definitely is.
Right.
Definitely is.
So you can see here, this is and we had talked about this, Dan, because this was part of the first 464 images that we got, and so I thought that this was the magazine inside of the gun, which made no sense, could have been, okay, well then how the heck is there this many shots? But
yeah, just to fill in the newer listeners here, when the images first came out, and I admit I was part of this as well by saying this was the magazine used at the crime scene, and the number of bullets missing out of this didn't match up with the number of casings found at the scene. And then folks reminded us and says, this was the magazine found in the safe, had nothing to do with the one found in the living room. So there was some, we circled back a couple times with that with a bunch of confusion. People at the time were claiming that we were pushing disinformation and misinformation and everything else. But just to clarify, this is the magazine that was found in the safe, had nothing, as far as we know, had to do with the crime. This is not the magazine from the gun in the living room. So correct.
Right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and one of the big reasons that we thought that is because this was the only image of a magazine that we got. We did not, in the first 464 photos, we did not get a photo of the actual magazine that was pulled out of the gun found at that crime scene, which did have blood on it and did have fingerprints on it.
Yep.
So that was odd.
And this one looks like, Stephen could help out too. It looks like this was laid on a countertop, perhaps even back at the Apple Valley Police Department office, somewhere where they laid everything out and took photographs of each side, the front, back, and things like that. So this was not the one, but yes, it did cause confusion because there was no images made available of the magazine that was used in the gun, of the Springfield gun, in the living room. So people put two and two together and thought that this was the one that was discovered. They're like, well, how could there be 6 casings found and there's still 10 or 11 bullets here in the magazine? And so that led to a whole bunch of other confusing jargon here, as far as people calling this a cartridge, someone calling this a magazine, someone calling this a clip. And so we spent the first several months, I think, Greg, just going over the definition because folks were getting those things wrong. Stephen, could you clarify some of the jargon, some of the verbiage here for the listeners that are non-gun enthusiasts?
Yeah, it's called, the proper terms magazine on this tier. And a clip is something like more or less like clips refer more to rifles, like a stripper clip used to be. They comes through the top. Magazines come more terms toward the rifles, AR-15, so they can be interchanged, but with proper terminology magazine. The other thing is, David, probably a pretty good, really great, probably a weapons aficionado. He usually have 2 magazines, but when it only has, what's it look like? It looks like it has maybe 11 rounds. You never, if a magazine's going to sit for a while, you never want it full capacity because it'll collapse the spring if it sits too long, and so it won't feed properly. So he's keeping one out of there. I used to keep 2 out of there at a large capacity. Leaves the spring a little bit looser, and it won't compress and it won't feed. Yeah, it won't jam. So that's why he's smart. He'd never have it loaded all the way to full capacity if it's laying around for a while.
Okay. Good to know. And he would have loaded these himself, so his fingerprints and his touch DNA would be on each of these bullet casings. Okay.
Yeah, you'd have a thumb. Usually with the thumb thing, unless you had an automatic little tool you can load them with. I doubt that. He's old school. And Kamel could have, she's shooting. She could have loaded it too, also.
Okay. Yeah. Good. This helps.
Yeah.
Now,
is there any reason not to test this one, or not to make this, item whatever 20, 25 or something? Why not itemize this one and why not test it?
Sure. There's going to be prints on that. There's going to be prints on that magazine.
Oh yeah, it was clearly used anyways.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the only thing I can think that would, is that they didn't test the other guns either. They didn't print the other guns, but this one was found at the actual crime scene. The other guns were mostly in his basement. This was, if this was supposed to be tied to the weapon that was used in that house, I just still don't understand why they didn't label it and why they didn't test it. If they're not going to test, because there's many items that they didn't test, but at least label it. It seems very, very relevant.
No, it absolutely is.
Yeah, I mean, they wrapped this thing up quickly and just said he did it, and no reason to test anything else. When in fact, it looks to me, there's going to be possibly, somebody else's prints on there, and yeah.
Well, even then, I mean, the lab could also use the DNA found on this magazine, and they can cross-reference it with the other one to actually go and confirm DNA. So they could do that, and they clearly didn't do that either.
Yeah, and I don't see. I'm looking at. I mean, it's hard to tell if they've even dusted this thing or tried to even pull anything off of it. It's hard to tell. No powder, no fingerprint powder on it.
I mean, they took it from the crime scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they photographed this at the crime scene, but they photographed it, but not label it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to check the evidence and property file to see if they did actually label this as something, or if it's listed somewhere. Because it
sure.
might be. I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, it should have a tag next to it.
Something.
Yeah.
The way they can kind of itemize it. So.
These are hollow points, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can tell by looking at the front of the bullet. You can see that.
If this magazine was full, is this what it would look like, or do you think that there was maybe one missing from it?
There's one missing from it.
There's one.
Sure. It's number 12.
I mean, if you look at number 4, if that also looks blank too, that was another weird one.
It definitely does. I can't answer that one because it's a side stack when it goes in, so we should see number 4. I thought the same thing.
And like Stephen was saying, because it's spring-loaded, if you see the ammunition is in 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and 5, obviously there's one in 4 too, you just can't see it. But it's clearly nothing in 12 is what Stephen's saying, and then you purposely leave one empty or 2, correct? There'd be no way for nothing being 4. There'd be no way for 4 to be empty, is that correct?
Right, exactly. The other thing too is, remember we had an unspent round in the living room.
Right.
Okay, and so did that come off of here? Did they put it back? Like I said, I think that somebody either, wasn't familiar with the weapon, and they just went ahead and then pulled the slide back, instead of checking, and they expended a live round onto the ground.
Unless there's anything else on the magazine, we can move on to the next topic here.
All right, the topic is The Drug Deal, starring Chris Peck.
Great title, I love it.
This one starts off by saying, the gun safe and the weed on the dresser were 2 more indications of a scene interrupted. Within days of finding the bodies, authorities were informed of, quote, a possible drug deal, end quote, between David Crowley and his friend Chris Peck. Peck told authorities he was not David's drug dealer, considered David a mentor when it came to film production. According to Detective Booth's report, quote, Mr. Peck went on to describe that he has known David and Kamel for several years and had traveled to Oklahoma with David and Daniel Mason and Mitch Heil to help film scenes for the Gray State Concepts trailer back in March of 2013. The group had traveled to Oklahoma where a lot of the filming was done. Mr. Peck stated that he has worked on and off with David on the project of Gray State. Where do we want to start here, folks? The weed or Chris Peck or the photographs?
I mean, they're both kind of interchangeable at this point. If we think about it with Chris Peck, he did lie to the police because in the police reports, basically he saying he was not David's drug dealer, but he was selling David some pot. So, I mean, there's that. So, I mean, what is it, Peck?
What
are you the dealer or are you not?
I mean, if I sell somebody, weed once, am I their dealer? I guess would be the question. How many times would I have to sell it to you in order for me to become your dealer?
Exactly. But the thing is, I mean, if he was going over to go and buy pot from him, chances are he's probably done it before. I mean, I think it's a fair assumption.
Sure. My question is, who's the informant of a possible drug deal? How all of a sudden, how are they informed? I mean, that could be a bunch of BS. Here all of a sudden says, hey, these guys are buying weed from this guy Peck, and I mean, why all of a sudden who informed them of that? My second part of the question is, what are the marijuana laws in Minnesota?
Great question, Dan.
Illegal. There wasn't medical marijuana back then, so it was outright illegal. I'm not sure any other, specifics other than that. All I know is that the photograph on the left, it shows the open container with the tweezers, and then the package on the right with the Ziploc, it's flipped over, but it's labeled with a Sharpie AK-47. That was the strand, that was the name of it. So is there any connotation from you guys as far as that? Would that ever be the case? Leaving it open with a 5-year-old daughter in the house? Or is that also staged to make it look like this guy was just aloof?
Yeah, the thing on the left.
Yeah, go for it.
Go ahead, Stephen.
The thing on the left, that's a grinder, right? That's a grinder for your weed. And then the AK-47 is a strain of weed, which is very powerful for weed.
Yeah, but that doesn't look like California. I mean, in California, I wouldn't call that an AK-47. Is it?
No, I'd call that no offense, Greg. That looks like Mexican weed to me.
It looks like Bammer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, it really does. I'm in San Diego, and in the old days, they had a lot of that coming over the border, and it was all stems and seeds.
And that would make sense, especially if, they can't, there's not that many people that can get to it, but obviously David knows who to go to if he needs weed. It's also very small. I mean, how much could this bag fill? I know I have it zoomed in here, but maybe $20-$30, maximum. I can't, it doesn't seem like there's that much in it.
No, we don't know how much did he smoke, or I mean, maybe there's some weed elsewhere he's hiding it, but he definitely wouldn't leave that out with his daughter around.
Right.
Well, my question is, see, if he's got his bong and everything in the bathroom, why not just keep it all together? I mean, it seems logical. It's out of the way. It'd be out of reach for Mia. He's also got his pipe over on his like right below the gun safe. I mean. Yeah, I mean, it would. It would be, I would see that. You wouldn't have it all over the place. You'd have it in one spot or put away in one spot. You wouldn't have it all over, the pipe here, the bong here, the weed over here, Yeah. And, I mean, that's the thing I kind of an issue with as well, is like, I mean, he's a parent. He's obviously a pretty responsible parent, pretty devoted to his family. I mean, he's not going to leave this out.
Yeah, and if it's like Dan said, it was a felony back then, you're definitely not going to leave it out. I mean, that's, you're going to hide it from authorities. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, especially considering the topics he's going on and looking at. I mean, who's to say the police wouldn't just jump in? I mean, we've heard of cases before where police, like somebody's looking into something and police end up, going after that person for some random charge. Or random assumption, rather. Just to find that person wasn't guilty.
Well, that's why I don't see marijuana coming off the feds as a Schedule 1, because that's the last thing to get into your house for probable cause.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's my view. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was just all basically there to kind of just stack all these things against him to show you the stoner.
Sure.
I mean, in places where it's illegal, I mean, let's be honest, you get kind of the more old school people, like those like the reefer madness kind of thing. Those are the types of people that are like, weed does all these bad things. I mean, me personally, I've done it before a few times. I'm not a fan of it, but it's one of those things. It doesn't do much. I mean, it's relaxing essentially.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I mean, we're in California. I mean, I used to have a medical marijuana card years ago, and it was fine, but. Just a bus there, leaving it out, everything else. And, hey, and this stuff here, from what I can see, and I used to be around a lot of marijuana in my day, professionally and friends and everything, this stuff doesn't look like it's very strong.
Yeah.
Now, just to jump in here from someone from the Midwest here, this is Dan, that right away the neighbors and the
I guess not family and friends, but people on the justice page here saw the weed, and here it's very common to say, oh my God, he was on weed, the guy's a drug dealer, he obviously went mad and killed his family. They don't know from talking from the folks on the East and West Coast to say this is, number one, it's harmless, number two, you would never go on a killing spree after smoking weed, and number three, by looking at it, this looks like very weak stuff, not powerful. Well, that doesn't come into play in the Midwest. The Midwest is, oh my God, he's a freaking stoner. What the hell's wrong with him? He's obviously guilty. And so I think this was laid out knowing how the public would perceive it and call him guilty on it without doing the homework to say that, was it even his? Was it just laid out? Did he buy any weed? Did he actually go to Peck's house that day? You know, we don't know if any of this is true.
Right.
We don't know if any of this is true. So but the family and friends and neighbors here that I have in the area all thought too, well, look, you see the weed, you see the gun, he's obviously was smoking dope, which means he's a big-time druggie. That's what the connection is here in the Midwest. That's the connotation. That's what we're dealing with here. It's not very common. And I would say, by looking at it, David probably was a recreational marijuana user. Not a big time, not a small time, but obviously maybe once a month grabbed a bag like this, and him and his wife enjoyed it. I saw nothing wrong with it at all. But I think it was there more for the shock value and to lead down the investigators level 1 investigator 101 course to say David did it because all this leads to it. You get all this paraphernalia in the basement, this anti-gun weapons and this militia kind of stuff. Yeah, staged, not staged, but the inventory from his garage sale all makes it look like the guy's part of a militia movement nutcase. Yeah, conspiracy nutcase. You know, so there you go. 24 hours, lock deal done.
Yeah, and the other thing is that
here believed it. You know, they all went with it. It was a very easy sell to the public.
You're spot on. The other thing too is, if they really wanted to stage this, I would have brought in some weight. You know, I brought in pound and a half of weed and laid it out like, he's a drug dealer and they have guns and everything else. He's not a casual recreational user. And I would have planted some coke or meth or something in there. Really amp it up. But the thing is that that little bag right there and it's marked AK-47 such. There's no weight here. There's no, this guy's obviously not a drug dealer either. But that's what if I was going to stage it, I would have put some weight with some weed in there. So look, this guy was a major drug dealer. Somebody came in that that deal or whatever. So no, it's not reefer madness. That's for sure.
Right.
God,
Yeah, it's definitely odd. Just like I said before, I think it was all basically kind of just shock value.
Yeah.
I mean, even Dan confirmed it. People were just automatically like, "Oh, he did it. But it's like, but did he really? I mean, who cares that he was smoking a little dope or a little pot? I shouldn't say dope. Not dope. But he smoked a little pot. Who cares? Look what he went through. He was over in the Middle East. So regardless we go with the PTSD theory or not, regardless, the one thing we know that, once again, this is according to Mitch Heil, so it's just kind of just an alleged thing. He would bring up that one incident. So even if he had it, it's still the fact that, I know that Sophia and I have talked about this, where if he was really having that PTSD and it was all based on that event, then could he be able to actually make the movie he was making? You look at some of the trailers, you see explosions, gunfire, that would trigger him most likely. And clearly it didn't.
It would trigger him.
So that's my point with it, is like, so he's not getting triggered, so I would already just kind of go on a limb and say he didn't have PTSD. He's just basically, this is just something to kind of, calm him down. It was a stressful situation. So, I could see something kind of coming back a little bit and be like, oh man, this is my life. Crap. I need to kind of relax a little bit. I get it. Not to mention the topic he's looking at is really dark. Looking at police state, looking at, Freemasons, all sorts of these other things. It's dark. Anybody goes down, I know I had a conversation, I want to say it was on the Facebook page, with a person who was just basically saying, I look up dark stuff all the time. I don't go down that path. I've looked up the stuff. It takes me to a dark place, and I have to take a step back from it.
Oh, man, it's terrible.
So, I mean, that's what I would already assume. Anybody that's looking into this kind of stuff, if it doesn't take you to a dark place, you're not really digging well enough. Or you already know.
No, not. Yeah. Well, the other thing, too, is, I mean, I've done some television stuff like that, and, you know, in California, I mean, you know, it's always this cocaine with all these crazy, you know, nuts, but, you know, weed, you know, he's a creative guy, you know, he relaxes, takes his mind off things, and I can see him, you know, writing a script or screenplay and smoking a little weed, and, you know, it's you know, there's a lot of artists that do that. It's not a big deal. It's part of what they do, you know, or you got Hemingway and these guys that were boozers, you know, or Jack London, they, you know, died at 38 years old because of booze, or, you know, so I mean, it's a hell of a lot safer, better for you. And, you know, nobody's in liquor stores and getting in bar fights because of weed, you know.
Right.
That stigma's there. And yes, Dan's right. This was definitely made to put a, you know, shed some, you know, dark light on the guy that he was a crazed PTS, you know, guy and stuff. So, you know, he used it for creativity probably too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because this weed being out there doesn't really line up with anything that we are being told about what David did, that he just snapped, he went into this dark place, he walked up behind his daughter, his wife, and shot them. There have been many stories, many different theories, none of them that really pan out, none that you're really going to find. Once you start actually researching this, you're never going to find any of that. It's just all speculation and stuff, but none of that really matches from you know, seeing these photos. It doesn't line up. It looks like they were doing something. Somebody knocked on their door, and something very, very bad happened here. That's the way that I would interpret looking at this here. Even with these tweezers too, it's like there's style to this. There's an art form to this. There's a reason why David would use a grinder as opposed to just using scissors and just chopping it up. You know, there's a method to all of this. This isn't somebody going crazy. If you're going crazy, you're not gonna take the time, which takes time, to grind this stuff up. Use tweezers, put it into this thing, and then use it, which we don't see. So, looking at that pipe that you talked about, that was underneath the gun safe, which is flipped. So there obviously was no weed in that pipe there, in the little glass pipe. Looking at the bong, doesn't really look like there's anything in there too. It looks like they had a whole system. They had stems that they would clean out, and so there's no weed there. I don't even know if they had, and because the big important thing, I don't even know if I mentioned this actually in this book, but in the toxicology reports, there was no weed found in there, so he may have never even smoked this yet. He had planned on it. I think we know that. There was intent to smoke weed, but, you know, just like Bill Clinton, he did not inhale, from what all these things point to here.
That's right. That's right.
That's not some giant.
It also ties in, I think, with later on the story with the hallucinogens and seeing things and having visions, and with you know, what he was introducing Comel to. I think it ties in as a gateway or a bridge to connect to that deeper stuff with the mushrooms and whatnot. And so they make this conveniently laying here to say, oh, you know, once again, done deal. And I don't know. I know, Greg, that you believe that they were interrupted with something. I think that this was a stage, and I think that this was open and laid out purposely to make it look like that. But I think even though if you are right that they were interrupted with this, it's got nothing to do with the crime itself. Whether him and Comel were smoking it that day or not, or even went to pick it up that day or not, this has nothing to do with the triple homicide in Apple Valley, the weed whatsoever. So I think that's the case. The next thing, we get down to the thing with you guys had asked earlier, how did they know weed was involved? How do they know that Chris Peck was the weed dealer? I think it comes up in the next sentence. Regarding the alleged drug deal, Detective Booth continued, quote, "The text message was sent at 7:22 a.m. on December 19th, 2014. David allegedly contacted Chris Peck asking, 'Do you have any?' Arrangements were then made for David and Comel to go to Chris Peck's residence.
and that's in Minneapolis, by the way. After receiving this information from Detective Shane Klokanos, Detective Tommy Booth immediately contacted Chris Peck for more information. Peck stated David and Kamel came by his residence to pick up a, quote, small amount of marijuana on December 19th, 2014. That was the last time Peck saw David and Kamel. The Crowleys had wished him a Merry Christmas and a safe trip, Booth reported. 2 days later, Peck stated that he went to Iowa for Christmas. So, lots of information here. My first question is, when they pull the records, the text records, they'll know the date and time stamp, correct, Steve? Stephen, with the December 19th, 7/22. But would it say, do you have any? Would they actually have that? The documentation from the cell phone company, actually, they would actually have the text, wouldn't they?
No.
No, the documentation's not there from the cell phone company.
Right.
This
will be off of his phone, because what as far as I know, is your texts aren't like emails. They can't go back and pull those.
They just pull the time and the date stamp, not the actual.
Yeah.
I see.
Correct. Yeah.
But they had David's phone, so if they were able to access his phone, then they should have been able to access all of his text messages, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we have to come off the phone. Yeah.
Usually
Okay, but here's the deal. This text was never sent from his phone. It's not there in any of the phone records.
That's correct.
You look at his PDF stuff from the AT&T, it's not there.
So where did
there was no text sent.
So where did the Detective Shane Klokanos, where did he get that information from then? I think Stephen had already mentioned that.
That's a very good question.
Where is it coming from?
I would guess
An air?
somebody like an informant, probably. As somebody just trying to go get the information and steer it in the direction they want it to.
Keep in mind, Detective Shane Klokanos was just recently awarded a new promotion and an award at the Apple Valley Police Department. I think it was just last month. Was he not?
He was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a side note, but go on.
You don't get. Yeah. Most phone companies can only access texts for so many hours, and they disappear even on their site. All they can have a timestamp and when it was sent, but they're not. There's no database holding your exact text. That's why a lot of people, they text and it disappears. If you get rid of your phone, there's no record of actually what you said. They can't have that. They don't have that on most of the systems.
They did have a search warrant that could have searched for all types of apps, like what is that one, WhatsApp or whatever, where you could send text or do calls. But they never mention anything. They never show screenshots, or they don't mention other calls being made, or that there was other apps being used. Mm-hmm. That information's not there, but they have that capability, and they had the legal right to search for it.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have that information. No, nothing at all.
They had David's cell phone. They had his computer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they
had all that information, or they had all the electronics, but we don't have anything from the police saying, hey, yeah, we did that, and this is what we came up with, and here's a screenshot of it, like they do of his messages through Messenger, or Kamel's text messages to our friends, or emails even. They included all of that, but they did not include this one text.
Yeah, that goes back to...
That's very important. I go back... Go ahead, Stephen.
I'm sorry. I go back to who was the informant that with information that there was a drug deal. I mean, who's that person? Who made that call to say, oh, there's a drug deal here? And that goes on to go ahead and discredit David also. It sounds like it was, more of a drug deal than just buying a little weed kind of thing,
And then why would Chris Peck go along with it if that never happened?
Exactly. Yes.
And so when the police report first came out, when we received that this happened, I think most people bought it hook, line, and sinker that that's probably what did happen. But then when Sophia received the phone actual activity on that cell phone, smartphone activity messages, and then we went, and she went on to prove that there was nothing on December 19th, much less at 7:22 a.m. of a text going anywhere from David's phone. What brought into question was, did this ever even take place? And so that's where we are now for the newer listeners out there, that there was no Chris Peck, hey, do you have any, so I could come by and pick it up at your Minneapolis apartment. The only thing we have is the actual phone records that show that actually prove that this did not take place.
Yep.
And then we don't know where Chris Peck actually lived on the police report. What he provided police was a P.O. box in Marion, Iowa. Now, Stephen, how common would it be for someone to give you a residence as a P.O. box to the authorities?
You're not, if it's a mail annex, like a UPS annex or something like that, like I pay for a business annex, I can consider that actually a physical business address. As far as home address and such, no. I mean, it's, you give them a physical address, not you don't live in a P.O. box.
Well,
but why so why did the Apple Valley Police Department think that was okay to just take that answer and type it in, and now it's in the police reports? Wouldn't they have pushed back to say, sorry, buddy, we can't take a P.O. box for your residence. So
sure,
what is it? Or you can always leave it blank as well, correct?
Yeah, also, to get those P.O. boxes, they want a physical address, but you would ask them up front instead of taking the cops taking one more step and, going, and matching up at the P.O. box place, whether it's, U.S. mail or annex, that they didn't get a card that says, oh, this is where the guy physically lives. No, you'd ask them, and unless you live in a box or maybe you live in a motel or something, but you'd have a physical address somewhere attached. And if you are homeless or something, and ask for next to kin for the closest address too.
And so, with all the witnesses here in the 94-page police report from Apple Valley, Chris Peck is the only one that provided detectives with a P.O. box for his address. Right. And that's actually a P.O. box where his mother lived in Iowa, and it clearly states that he was residing in Minneapolis, Minnesota at a home, and we never did get that address anywhere, which is, the whole thing is strange nonetheless. Now, we do know that on the 19th of December was the last day of school for Rania before the Christmas break, and they did go to pick her up around 3 o'clock. So the allegation that in the meantime they went to Chris Peck's home at around 1 p.m. to pick up the weed, makes sense. But we still don't even know if that was even true, if any of this stuff is true.
Well, I'm sorry to be redundant. I just go back to within days of finding the bodies, authorities were informed of a possible drug deal. This is post-10. Oh, the possible drug deal after they found the bodies. So all of a sudden, there you go, Dan, is, they're putting culpability on him being a drug dealer or whatever, but possible drug dealer after they found the bodies. I mean, who does that? I mean, that just, it doesn't make sense to me,
No, I think that was just used once again, kind of like how the gun safe was, just to kind of give like a clear story to the people, so that way nobody's going to start digging.
Right. Exactly.
Do you guys think that they would have, police back in 2014 would have used David's cell phone to see if it would have pinged, to see the physical location of that phone, to see if it actually was in Minneapolis? For those not familiar, that's about a 20-minute drive from Apple Valley. Would detectives have gone that far to say, look, let's prove that you were actually there? I'm assuming no, but could they have the opportunity to do that?
Well, so yes, I know for a fact they would have done this, because they did this. Are you guys familiar with the Kyron Horman case that occurred here? The missing child. Okay, so he was a missing child. Long story short, they pinged the crap out of the cell phones to go and see, to actually track the stepmom. And the thing is, she was going in and out of the service, and all sorts of other things. She was literally all over the place for that one. So, that was back in 2010. So, this being 2015 and everything. Even going back and just tracking the cell phone in 2014, they would have been able to do that, no problem.
Would there have been an extra fee or a charge that the law enforcement would have declined then to save money?
Honestly, I think it was just a little bit more, it's not very expensive to do. Most of us could probably do it ourselves, just using simple programs on Google and stuff. We can actually go back pretty far with it. But with the police, they've got technology we aren't even, we don't technically have access to. So, they would it shouldn't be too expensive. They've already got the machines. They can just go and just basically run it. It wouldn't take very long to do.
And if you look at the phone records, you'll see that they have GPS on his phone records, and he never even left his little area, not since November.
Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Okay, that's very important. Wow.
So, and I need to go back and look at Camel's, but I'm pretty sure that Camel didn't leave her area.
Well, now that we're
but
talking
I need to
Camel
double
and her
check
phone
it.
records, if you look at her phone records, now there's a really, really weird part I saw when I was looking through, and just like that was just now. There was a usage on, and this is in January in 2015, on the 8th, 11th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. And it looks like it's outgoing. A lot of it is.
Yeah, I mean, the cops need a warrant to ping a phone in a case like this. And what I'm looking up now, which I didn't know, they can ping back to 5 years. So back then maybe not. Now they can't. So, but they could ping back the locations based on GPS. And those phone records are held by AT&T and Verizon and such. So they go back 5 years to see where you're at.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
which they did have all of that. So yeah, I'm glad that we have those records, because if we didn't, I'd still be thinking that everything that is mentioned here, that a Chris Peck story is all true, and we're kind of finding out that, wait a minute, how do we know if any of this is true? Why doesn't it match up with what these documents show? Maybe there is a reasonable explanation, but it's not matching up, and there's no mention of it.
Absolutely.
Why even contact Chris Peck? What was the main reason? Because Chris Peck was one of the last people to see them. We have a lot of people that are saying David was holding Camel captive, that he wasn't letting her out, he wasn't letting her do anything during this time. And we have at least a couple different facts here that show that she was out there. She was out in public with David.
Yep.
She was out in public without David during all of this time. It doesn't match up with this whole theory that David was this controlling person, blah, blah, blah. And so it's just, it's just the more that you look into it, if you take the time to look into this, the more that you see what they're telling us just does not add up and doesn't make sense. And we just need some more follow-up.
So something else we can also refer to is that the emails between Allison and Camel.
Yes.
That was on the 21st, sure, but like she talked about, like, when she was talking to, replying to the reply, of course, from Allison. Allison was kind of like, being a little pushy. Well, why haven't you guys kind of, talked to Mom or whatever? Well, she goes into it and actually says, well, we're dealing with some stuff right now. And I don't remember the exact quote off the top of my head, but it's something along the lines of, like, basically as lovers, as parents, as a couple, the kind of thing. They're dealing with all sorts of issues. They're really, really deep issues. So once again, she was very open, and she also admitted that she's also screening calls from out of state. She admits that in the same email, which means that does technically confirm she was actually screening her calls from her folks. So, I mean, to me, that's like, okay, well, there's some confirmation of this was actually occurring, but it was by choice. It wasn't like David was holding her back. He wasn't. And she even confirms, if anything, I would argue she ran the house. She was, she also admits she was the breadwinner in her journal. But she ran the house is what it kind of came off as. And if she's running the house, how controlling is David really then if she's running the house?
Great question.
So that's my whole thing there. It's like I don't buy that theory at all. I mean, it doesn't add up. Just looking at it, like if you look at anybody that's going to come from a psych background, they'd tell you the same thing. That's clearly not a controlling person. They're not running the household. They're not controlling everything. Therefore, they're not really controlling the whole situation then. Which David, he was just kind of in his own world. He wanted to get his stuff done. We went over the psych profile last night. I'm sure you probably recall. Looking at David being that the commander profile, the EN TJ? Yeah, ENTJ. And that's the thing, it's all about control, but he's also like, he's on a mission. So when he's doing something, it's just focus it down, you know, but he also controlling the situation. But Kamala's clearly like-minded, you know, I mean, everything with them is very, very cohesive. You know, even the way they're raising their daughter. I mean, if you look at it, like, for instance, like, those people with kids and everything, we see this too, especially with kids, like, going into preschool, kindergarten. First thing what teachers mention, either they're going to mention, oh, your kid's really smart, or, oh, man, your kid's really athletic, or, you know, they, you know, really, like, energetic. They mention just, like, a trait, generally. Maybe two at most, but generally it's just one trait. They just really focus on that. Oh, your kid's doing really well in this area. Well, what's the one thing they said